Welcome back to another Nerdporeal Sci-Fi chat. It is I, the Nerdporeal Lifeform, also a weirdo who calls himself an Admiral. And of course, you can just call me Brian. But hey, what's up, everybody? Thanks for joining us. And once again, I'm not alone. This time, I have a very special guest. I had the honor of meeting him in Las Vegas. He does a very awesome morning show. Let me welcome Loki. How you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, brother?
Man, I can't believe I've never seen this many people in the beginning of a stream before. So I'm grateful. I'm thankful.
Well, we got the word out. Me and Tagge were doing a stream. Ended about 20 minutes ago, and I made sure to throw your link out and get the word out. It's gonna be great, dude. I love Forbidden Planet. It's one of the best sci-fi movies ever.
I totally agree with that. I mean, I'll be honest. I did not discover this movie until really recently. So, just to begin, I'm just curious. How did you discover Forbidden Planet?
I was a little kid. My dad loved this movie. My dad was a big Leslie Nielsen fan. Loved him in this. Loved him in Naked Gun. Loved him in Police Squad. And everything he did, he loved it. So I was fortunate and got to see this when I was little. Scared the shit out of me when I was a little kid. But as I got older, I started seeing more and more of the almost like the birth of Star Trek in this, and this is a very psychological movie too. So it keeps you interested no matter how many times you watch it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, there's a lot of high concept science fiction in this movie that Star Trek obviously emulated from. I mean, just I could just think of 5 episodes of the original series that directly either stole stuff or really emulated this idea in the first place. So, I mean, to me, and I said this in my opening, and to me it's pre-Trek, and I stole that from the wonderful Bird of Prey 5 and stuff. He actually said that to me. So, but yeah, that's this is I did not see enough people talking about like the connections between this movie and what eventually became Star Trek and stuff. So hence why I wrote that's hence why I did the review for this movie as one of my earliest movie reviews for my channel. So oh man, so are you I was just curious, you want to start talking about the movie and stuff?
Oh,
The
sure, absolutely.
so so I'm curious. So let's talk about the universe first. So apparently, they discover hyperdrive in like the 23rd century. So equivalent to Star Trek, but of course hyperdrive is in Star Wars. And I think this was one of the earliest movies that talks about colonizing space outside of the solar system. Do you think so?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Definitely. And how they kind of set up the movie and start the movie explaining that, absolutely beautiful. It is even to this day. You know, we're out in space and we are exploring and we are seeing new worlds and new civilizations. Oops, I stole that. But yeah, absolutely.
So obviously we have this iconic, and I kind of when I made the opening for this stream just like half an hour ago, I wanted to recreate the way that the vertical wipe that goes up when it reveals the name of this movie. So, but yeah, the we go let's go into we begin the movie. So the first thing that they do is, hey, we're on a mission in D space, and we're in the Altair system. So, and what's funny is Altair is a real star, and it's actually, I think it's one of the nearest stars. It's not as close as like Alpha Centauri, but it's pretty close. So it's one of those famous, and because of this movie, it's a famous science fiction name that's been reused multiple times. So in this case, they have to go to Altair 4 to look for to find out what happened to find a missing ship. The ship is the Bellerophon, obviously, and so they're in hyperdrive. They're in hyperdrive, so they're going well past the speed of light and stuff. So in order for them to stop or to decelerate, they have to go into these pads right here. Doesn't
That
this
looked
look
very
familiar?
yes, yes.
Doesn't this
Those
look
look so
familiar?
familiar.
I'm like, maybe they're beaming out. Maybe they're simply beaming out or something.
No one. We were talking earlier before the stream started. No one at this point had thought about inertial dampeners yet. So how are we gonna slow down without becoming smudges of grease on the window shield? Oh well, we'll have these pads that we can step into, and that way the ship can slow down, and we aren't turned into little pads of oily mush.
I know, and look at them. I mean, look, obviously everything goes green with the people, but then when you look at the background, they keep changing the filters. Obviously, it goes from like purple to blue to red, I believe. I might be totally wrong on this, but like if you did some good stuff back in the '60s, this would be a good movie to go see in the theater. Well, hi, I'll say that. Kind of like 2001 was for a lot of people too.
Oh yeah, this is definitely like a drive-in movie. It's a
Yeah.
movie you want to go see at a drive-in.
So yeah, I mean, it's funny. I've never been to a drive-in movie at all. And I kind of want to change that and stuff.
Change
Like,
it. There's still a couple places around that can do drive-in.
yeah, because I'm in Chicago and like drive-ins are like, because I'm a city guy
Yeah.
and stuff. So there's like,
No-
there's like none. I have to like drive really far to find one and stuff. So, but it would be. I think it'd be worth a trip. I'd have to figure out what I'd have to see what movie I'd want to see. Would be the perfect movie to see for a drive-through. I usually think horror is usually the staple or any B movie or something that would be appropriate to go see through at a drive-through.
it's definitely something that they should have taken advantage of over the last couple of years. I really do believe drive-ins could have made a huge comeback.
I remember. Yeah, so yeah, I definitely have to. It's one of the things I have to check off my bucket list eventually. Then, speaking of Star Trek, I have to go see the motion picture. I want to see the motion picture 4K in the theater. It's probably the one thing I'll support Paramount on is going to see that in the theater. So,
Well,
just made me think of
everybody's
that
been
now.
waiting. Everybody's been waiting for that director's cut to come out for like the last 10 years. So
Yeah, that's true. I remember there was rumored that it was going to come out in 2019 for the 40th anniversary and stuff, but obviously, I was surprised that they even decided to even go with it. So, oh, look who's here! Hey, looks like we have another visitor who's not as fashionably late as I thought he would be. Let's have a warm welcome to the Baron himself, Orman Tagge, brother of the
Good.
Death Star survivor.
Good evening, everybody. How you doing?
Good, good. You came just in time. We're talking about deceleration pads and stuff.
Isn't that an interesting concept they had in that one?
Yeah, and this was years before before TNG or Voyager or D Space Nine because I don't think there were inertial dampeners in the original Star Trek at all. So
No, no, not at all. You had something like this in Doc Smith's uh, Lensman's Chronicles, where they had to have some form of way to when they went from the certain speeds on down, so they didn't get smeared all over the place. So you're definitely seeing elements of the 1940s, 1930s pulp being woven into this movie in that fashion.
were those Lensman novels considered pulp? Were they?
Yeah, that'd be pulp novel. That's space opera pulp. The reason why it'd be considered pulp is because many of these were published in the pulp magazines, and then after there were, then of course, just like you could count Isaac Asimov, A.E. Van Vogt, Arthur C. Clarke, all these guys as pulp writers because their works were originally published serialized in the pulps out there, whether it be Amazing Stories, on down and then collected together and then condensed. Like I Robot was a series of short stories in the pulp magazines. The Sentinel was a pulp story that was used from 2001, the basis for that one. So, and just because it's pulp doesn't mean it's bad or amateur or kiddish. It just meant the fact that they were being printed on in magazines that had that pulpy paper. And of course, as time went along, people started having kind of a negative connotation to it. But yeah, these I would consider it pulp as well as the birth of space opera.
So they released like so every chapter was basically or everything that was released in these pulp magazines was like a chapter in the published novel that it would eventually become. Is that how it works?
Yeah, that's exactly what happened, and they didn't necessarily intend on doing it that way, but they pieced them all together. The Martian Chronicles is another example of that, where you took the different elements, and it's like, well, there's all part of this continuing story. Let's put it all together. Believe it or not, Dune would even be considered that because Frank Herbert released many parts of Dune in the pulp magazines of the day.
Ah, I see. Interesting. I definitely have to. I have the first book. I have the book Interplanetary, the first Lensman book.
Yeah.
So, and I learned about this because there's an anime. There's an anime that came out in the '80s. That was basically something that the family of E. Doc Smith hated so much. But I listen to anime music, so I have a couple of songs from that show. So that's why I never saw the show, but that's why I'm familiar with it in the first place. So.
Well, if you're going to go with Planetary, I know it's off the subject that we have here. Be careful. Don't let it jade you with the whole series because it's kind of a filler book, kind of a lead up to the actual Lensman story itself. You're not going to see much with Lensman in there, but you're going to see a lot with the prehistory, what the universe is, universe building with that book. You're not really going to get into the crux of the Lensman until about, I'd say, Gray Lensman is when you really get into the crux of that.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. All right. Okay, cool, interesting. So they go through this DC procedure. No, before I even go any further, I want to say hello to people in the chat really quickly. So we got Pop Culture Mechanic, what's up? Stephen Ransom, welcome. Dave G Sound, welcome. Low Spec Linux, hey there, good to see you again. Rough Girl TV, welcome. DJ Ronnie G, heck yeah, man. Rich Kaiju, Godzillionaire, what's up? Lady Mist, Cloud Sailing, the legendary Adega Outlaw,
Hell yeah.
and Chris Persia. Wow, Chris Persia. Now I feel part of the club now. I don't know if I said, yeah, I already said Dave G Sound, so yeah. Apollome's Minion, welcome. And the Catman, aka D.D. Myers, welcome. My friend in real life, Brian Anderson. And some guy named Loki. So
Loki.
So yeah, so let's continue. So they get out of the DC pad. So they've arrived in the Altair system, and I was watching a deleted scene. So the captain, or he's not the captain, he's actually Commander Adams, played by Leslie Nielsen. Before he was on airplanes, telling people, you're the only chance we've got. And
Not serious.
Hey. I am serious. And don't call me Shirley. Baron. So I love that movie. I could quote that all the time. Hey, you're Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Look, kid, you try running up the court with these guys. So yeah, so in the deleted, I watched the deleted scene of Forbidden Planet. So we see it briefly. We see looks like they edited something out or they didn't include something, but there's a point where Adams gets pissed off at Jerry, his second in command, and I think he's also the helmsman or the navigator. And he basically gets out of I'm gonna literally say this, he gets out of Lightspeed too close to the sun or to the star. Luckily, Adams is not Darth Vader and wouldn't choke him to death for his failure for the last time. So but yeah, so he gets kind of pissed off in the deleted scene, but we don't really see it in the main film. So they're pretty close to the system. We have this cool shot right here. They're right next to the star, the Altair star, and they're basically making preparations to approach the one planet that's that can hold life, and that's Altair 4 right here. So look at how large the planet is compared to the ship, because especially when you've seen enough Star Trek TOS episodes, like this the ship looks almost the same, almost exactly the same size as the planet when it's orbiting. But here in this case, you see the major difference in size between this ship and the planet itself. The planet looks obviously they do it by showing only a small portion of the planet, and everything else you have to leave to your imagination. I think Kubrick kind of continued this in 2001, especially with Jupiter, like just showing how large and gargantuan these planets really are and stuff, and how little we are. So
exactly, and you know what, and you really have to think, though, about 10 years after this film was made is when you had 2010 or 2001, I mean, and this really film of Forbidden Planet, I would say, is the first real step into mature science fiction movies. I mean, yeah, you had some great ones with The Day the Earth Stood Still, but it was a Static on the Earth story. It had a great robot, but you could tell it was a limited budget one. This was definitely one where let's take it to the next step. Let's have the special effects. Let's have the story. Let's be Star Wars 20 years before Star Wars. And obviously, 10 years later, you have the same thing with Kubrick with doing 2001, that majestic, let's make this big spectacle, as well as the story behind it. And of course, Lucas 10 years after that, 20 years after this film. It's just magnificent. This is mature science fiction from the 50s. We have a lot to thank this film for.
Well, you have like a bunch of B movies though too that it didn't quite take themselves too seriously, like This Island Earth and movies like that had very low budgets and tried to do the best they could, and they come off looking cheesy, but it was like they were still trying. They were trying to make sci-fi, and they were trying to get people interested in sci-fi. But then you have these tentpole movies like the Thing from Another World, and you have Forbidden Planet, that successfully made them great sci-fi or sci-fi horror, however you want to look at it.
Exactly.
Oh, The Thing from Another World is an amazing movie. Obviously, whenever you think of The Thing, you always think of John Carpenter's movie, obviously, and for good reason. That's the best. It's the best of the three. But I have a strong like the Angry Video Game Nerd. I have a very strong liking. I have a strong how'd I say it? I have a very strong attachment to the original movie as well.
Yeah, they changed a lot from the original Who Goes There in the old black and white version. And Carpenter's is more true to what is in Who Goes There, but still, that we'll make him a big vegetable. He's like a walking carrot.
Yeah, in the original, he's like a walking carrot, like Frankenstein creature or something, like Martian that just comes out of the ice and stuff. Whereas you don't know in Carpenter's movie, you have no idea. You have no idea what that thing's actual form is, because of how many times it's mimicked other organisms throughout the universe and stuff. So it's that type of unknown that makes the movie super scary and super compelling, I'd say.
Which goes into this film too, because there's so many elements that's unknown in this film too. The mysteries that are involved there. I mean, with the original The Thing, of course, you have Marshall Dillon. Think about it. That was James Arness playing the monster in that film. Just like you have here, you have Leslie Nielsen playing the captain. And if you even go further, you have Roscoe P. Coltrane in this movie as it goes. But, you have the krill, the big mystery of the krill. The novel tried to kind of touch on what the krill were. There were some people who actually did a little bit design what they were, but they're still a mystery. We don't know anything about it. And the whole aspect as we go along with the storytelling, of course.
Yeah, if you look at the planet right now, that is a barren planet. There's almost nothing on the surface. Imagine giant krill cities on the surface, and the reason why they're not there anymore is it's been hundreds of thousands of years and the damn things were destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep,
there's nothing left on the surface to say this is where the cities used to be. Everything's under the surface.
Mm-hmm.
I like how you said it's barren. You know,
I try not to say
just
anything.
saying, just saying, just saying.
This is City Alpha 5. Yeah.
T Alpha 6 exploded. Oh, you don't want to get me. You don't want to get me into it. So my name is Admiral for a reason. But I'm kind of curious now. I know I'll talk one more thing about John Carpenter's The Thing. I'm curious if they designed the craft that the thing arrives in like thousands of years earlier, based off of this, because it looks like they really used the same type of design for the UFO or the saucer.
What? I don't think exactly the same of it, because there was a lot of stuff out of this era of science fiction where you did have the saucer design across the way, and for John Carpenter, obviously it was an homage to the '50s horror science fiction films to have that saucer. So yeah, a little bit of this ship, a little bit of the when the saucers invade, when they're taking out Washington D.C. before Independence Day and all the others, and of course at this time everybody was going saucer crazy. There was a flying saucer craze.
Yeah,
So
the Earth Stood Still did the same thing. I think had the
Yep.
same type of
Yep.
saucer as well. Okay, flying
exactly.
saucer.
So I think with John Carpenter, knowing John Carpenter, it was an homage of all these films. It wasn't just the one.
Speaking of the '50s, I'll say this much: even the Three Stooges, when they were still making shorts in the late '50s with Joe, there was actually a science fiction they actually made a science fiction episode where they go into a rocket, they go to another planet, and they or no, they're going around and they think they see a flying saucer, but it's actually a paper plate full of potato salad and stuff. So yeah, and of course they used all the same effect, but when they do go to another planet, another short, they do all the same effects. Like you have the giant iguanas and stuff, and the women are actually cannibals and stuff. It's ridiculous. So, but yeah, but going back to Forbidden Planet, so they arrive at Altair 4, and of course, I don't know if you guys know, but they borrowed the Altair. There's just the idea of naming the planets by the star and by the number of the planet, the numbered planet from the sun or from its star and stuff. They use that in Star Trek as well and stuff.
Oh yeah.
So once again, another thing to point out. So this Bellerophon expedition, they get hailed, or they just simply get hailed by the planet's surface, and despite the fact that the world is quote unquote barren and stuff, there's actually a single residence on the planet, which somehow is like completely, it's green around the house, but everywhere else it's desert. Kind of makes me think of that TNG episode with the destroyed planet, and everything's gone except for a single house, and of course it was this like incorporeal being. It was from season 3. I remember I just watched it not too long ago. I can't think of the name. But you know what I'm talking about.
Yep, third season episode, I believe. Yep.
Yeah, so the same idea. So especially when you see Morbius's residence right about. See if I can get that shot of it. But yeah, so here, like basically everything surrounding it is barren except for this right here. So the house and everything is okay. So, but going back to the ship really quickly. So they're talking to this guy named Dr. Morbius. Not the Morbius that just came out in the theaters, but I'm curious if that Morbius was named after this Morbius.
That would be interesting if he was named after, because someone loved this movie.
Oh, I'm pretty sure. So they talk to Dr. Morbius, and he's basically like, "Why are you here? I don't require any aid or anything." And they're like, "Well, we have to find out." Adams is like, "Hey, we have to find out why. We have to find out what happened to your ship and what happened to the people on board and stuff, and that's why we're out here." And he's like, and Morbius is like, "Hey, if you come down here, I'm not going to be. I do not hold me responsible for if anything happens to any of your crew and stuff. He's like, and Adams being, he's basically he's quite a bit. He's got quite a bit of Kirk. He's got that, and even a little bit of Picard in a way. He's like, please give me the please give me the coordinates. And then Morbius tries to repeat his request to not come down. He just completely shuts the transmitter off and stuff. Something Picard would do. So, so they basically go and they decide to they basically get the coordinates and they decide to land. In this segment, I did see quite a bit because I've seen Halloween. So the big reason why I know this movie exists, and especially this part of the movie, is because of Halloween. I can tell you exactly which scene in Halloween the kids are watching it in. It's when it's right after Michael Myers kills the first victim, and the kids kind of bored watching this. So he goes to the window to scare the little girl that Jamie Lee Curtis is babysitting with, and he goes to the window, and you hear all the sound effects, you hear the music, the tonal music from this movie, and the kid's looking outside and he sees a shadowy figure holding a body and walks into the house across the street, which is probably one of the creepiest scenes ever with this tonal music. So I don't know if you guys even like the first Halloween, but I always when I see this part of the movie, I always think of that scene.
It's an iconic part of the movie, and it's not just been Halloween. They have shown that scene in multiple movies. And anyone that loves this movie, when you catch it, you're like, holy shit, they're watching Forbidden Planet.
Mm-hmm. Yep. What other movies have they shown Forbidden Planet? And I'm curious now.
Mm-hmm.
If you know.
I not off the top of my head.
Movies and TV shows, but yeah, you see them. You always see it because there's always a reference point to. I think a lot of people look at this as kind of the pinnacle of 50s science fiction filmmaking.
Oh, absolutely, and I love the Day the Earth Stood Still. I think that's one. I can rewatch that movie like all the time. But this movie was like this movie. Mm-hmm. I think this movie's underrated, to be honest. The fact that I've never heard of this movie until or I've never really, because my dad, he had a lot of movies. We had a lot of VHS tapes. We even had some science fiction, but we never had this movie. I've never heard any mention of this movie at all. So how I heard of. You guys want to know how I heard of this? How I first heard of, or what made me start watching Forbidden Planet? Because I read this website called Not a Blog. And it's done by a certain author who will never finish his sixth book in a certain fantasy series and stuff. And he says, he's like, step aside. Instead of writing the book, he writes in his blog, step aside 2001, step aside Star Trek, step aside Star Wars. The best science fiction film ever is Forbidden Planet. Mm-hmm. So, and of course, I'm sure you guys know, he actually bought like Robbie the Robot. Mm-hmm. So he has Robbie the Robot in his house or something.
Yeah, he's got a 1x1 actually reproduction of Robbie, but yeah, he's got the basically studio prop quality out there that someone's making, and he's absolutely right. I mean, this film influenced J. Michael Straczynski. This film influenced George Martin. This film inspired Roddenberry. I mean, honestly, you watch this film. This is like watching a proto Star Trek.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Totally.
Whenever you have you have the out there people say about the best Star Trek films out there, and they always want to include Galaxy Quest, which is no problem. Obviously this is a Star Trek-esque. Let's have a little bit of fun with it. My argument is, if you're going to include Galaxy Quest, this film right here has to be included in as one of the best Star Trek films made in that area.
Well, just look at the relationship between the commander and the doctor. Mm-hmm. I mean, that doctor, that is Kirk and Bones, man.
Yes,
that is freaking Kirk and Bones.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's it's funny. It's that actor that plays Doc is in a TOS episode. It's the episode with the Kelvins, not the ship, the Kelvin, but the Kelvins, the ones that have paralysis fields. So they just push a button on their belt and everyone freezes. and stuff, and becomes totally vulnerable. And then if you do something against them, they'll turn you into crystal blocks, and then they'll they just crush it, and they'll kill the person and stuff. But that was the episode that Warren Stevens, who plays Doc, was in that episode. But before we go any further, we have our third guest finally came, the one and only Keith. What's up, Keith? How you doing?
Hey, everybody.
Hey,
Sorry,
Nicker.
we had a long show over on Pop Culture Minefield, and wow.
The hell you see? You mean Gary
I know,
wouldn't
right?
shut up? Gary wouldn't shut up. He just sat back and say that.
You mean Jerry, right?
Even I don't go there.
But look, I was listening backstage, and let me just say, Baron is right. This film was instrumental in helping Roddenberry figure out what he wanted to do. In fact, it's one of two movies that Roddenberry said that he used as a guide to helping him figure out what he wanted to do with Star Trek. Now, do you remember what the other film was?
Oh. You had to do this to me, didn't you?
You'll figure it out. Come on. I
thought Roddenberry denied. I thought Roddenberry denied that this was a major thing in the development of what became Star Trek.
Well, he might have. He flopped back and forth, but he did.
Yeah.
This was a inspiration because it was so ahead of its time for filmmaking for science fiction. Oh, what would be the other one?
I'll give you a hint. The movie came out in 1951.
Oh, the Day
the Earth Stood Still.
No.
No?
Good guess.
Okay.
No.
I didn't think it.
Here's another hint. It's not a sci-fi film.
It's a
one that
Western.
takes place on a ship
Heck,
or a
it was-
Western.
I think it's a Western.
Nope, not a Western.
No, Western.
Is it a naval?
Yes, it is.
Oh, Captain. No, not Captain Fearless. What is that?
Did they make a movie based on Captain Hornblower?
That's it.
Hornblower.
Okay.
That's it.
What movie is that? Is it called
Captain Horatio Hornblower, 1951, starring Gregory Peck, Virginia Mayo, James Kenney, Robert Biddy, and how you guys were talking about the relationship between the Doctor and the Captain. Really, the rest, I mean, the complete relationship that you see with Spock, Bones, Kirk, and Scotty, that's in Horatio Hornblower.
Mm-hmm.
So
I was thinking about this when I was watching it this afternoon. I like Jerry, but I don't see Jerry as Spock. I see Jerry as just a little bit of, he's a bit like Bones number 2 with maybe a little bit of Sulu.
Maybe
because he sounds
Morbius.
nice.
Well,
maybe
what-
Morbius would be like a kind of stand-in for Spock. He was very, very analytical.
well,
Oh,
now
Morbius
I
is
think.
like. Oh, sorry, give it.
No. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, Morbius to me is like a combination of like Dr. Corby from What Are Little Girls Made Of, Dr. Crater from The Man Trap, maybe a little bit of Flint from Requiem for Methuselah,
Let's throw in Daystrom.
Daystrom, yeah, Daystrom too.
Well, you also have to remember that, we say Spock and Kirk and Bones, but you got to remember that isn't really Roddenberry's original concept for Star Trek. That's eventually what he came up with. The original idea was for Dr. Boyce and Captain Pike and that crew. And that's,
About Captain April, because I know Captain April was like the very first name.
Yeah, initially Captain April. That was the name that he came up with, and eventually it became Captain Pike. So,
And of course, became, in the animated series, they made him into the first captain of the Enterprise. But yeah, it was very much him and Bryce relationship. At the time that Star Trek came out, there wasn't the concept of having this multi-cast series. It
Mm-hmm.
was a Jeffrey Hunter TV series,
Yeah.
and
Well,
you had
but that's the thing. No, that's the thing. That's talked about in the book Inside Star Trek.
Mhm.
Okay. That's the one written by the man that was responsible for, well, it's technically the boss over Roddenberry and a lot of the creative stuff. That was the book that features all of the memos, contracts, and other things because he had access to all that stuff to prove what he's saying about how Star Trek was made. And a lot of television shows in the 60s were always built around one particular performer. You always had your lead, and then your secondary star, and then your co-stars, and on and on and on and on, right? So
Yeah.
that kind of casting where it's like, we're all the same because this is that part of the story that a lot of the cast members of Star Trek would tell in the 1970s wasn't exactly true. They didn't start doing that until the 1970s. Prior to that, okay, William Shatner is the lead. The book Inside Star Trek features copies of all the contracts. And it lets you know in no uncertain terms exactly who your lead is and how that works. In fact, William Shatner, Leonard Nimoy, and DeForest Kelley were the only three considered to be irreplaceable. All the other actors' contracts, they could have been replaced.
and in
So,
many
like,
ways they were.
So like
Yeah,
James
I mean-
Doohan and all of them who were
They
credited
they
at
were
the end of the
replaceable.
show.
They
Okay.
were replaceable at the end
Yep.
of every season.
So I remember in season one, DeForest Kelley's name wasn't in the opening credits of
True,
season
true.
one.
Right.
It
But I
wasn't until
mean-
season two.
He became
Yeah.
such a big part of what they were doing, mainly because of how the show was being written. And
I'm just a simple, old-fashioned country
Doctor.
And the force of presence that he had. I mean, he wasn't
Yeah.
originally going to be part of it. He came in. I mean, he wasn't even in the second pilot.
No,
And then
it wasn't.
he was not even in the second pilot of Star
Corbo
Trek.
My Maneuver was his first episode.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, and as that goes, he became so integral that basically his force of presence, personality, the way he acted, that started that triumvirate where when you got the second season, he got his name in there. James Doohan, if they would have gone to a fourth season, he would have actually gotten his name in the beginning credit because at that
True.
time they considered him to be a powerful enough performer. But George Takei, Walter Koenig, Nichelle Nichols, they're rotatable because look at how many other people were sitting at these stations throughout the series. George Takei even left for a while to do the Green Berets with John Wayne. Grace Lee Whitney was let go. They were expendable. I mean, literally, they were the expendable ones.
again, I tell people if you have any real interest in Star Trek, you got to read the book Inside Star Trek because it fills in the gaps that all the other books written by the actors have. And it concentrates on Star Trek, on the show. It's not about getting into people's personal lives. It's all about concentrating on that show.
About the production and everything.
The
that went
production
down.
and it starts with the plane. It starts with the flight from New York to L.A. Okay, and you have on board the plane. Oh man, what is that guy's name again? I keep forgetting his name. Herbert Solo. That's his name. He has a problem. The problem is that they only have enough money to. He sold 2 shows and they only have enough money for 1. Is what they did, and he's coming back from having sold NBC. He sold Mission Impossible and he sold Star Trek.
Both
now,
both done at Desilu.
yeah. So because he was the head guy at Desilu, and so he's trying to figure out how he's going to break it to his boss that he did his job too well.
Who was his boss? Was Lucy his boss?
No. That's the other thing about this book. People have a really messed up idea of how Desilu worked. Okay, and when I say stuff like this is not me trying to come down on Lucy. Lucy was smart, very smart woman, but she concentrated on any and all projects and things that were directly related to the things that she was doing. And you got to remember, at this time, this would have been 1964. So, I don't know if she had met and married her second husband yet.
Yeah, I'm not
But
sure.
according to the book, Lucy's the only thing that you could approach her with, the only thing you could talk to her about, is the stuff directly related to what she was doing. Keeping her TV show on the air, keeping the deal with, I think it was CBS, all that stuff. Outside of that, she had no idea. And again, it's not that I'm saying that she wasn't bright. It's just, it's a lot to run a company. And there's a reason why Desilu ultimately ended up getting sold. Okay? So, her husband was a good guy, but there were things that even he couldn't do. And compared to Desi Arnaz, he was kind of... He wasn't really just sitting in the chair, but, there were certain things. And you had to have a lot of really competent people around you to be able to run things. Okay?
Desilu was a monster. It was a monster company. People don't realize how big that was.
Yes.
And so a particular department, Herb Solo's section of Desilu was the one that ran Star Trek and Mission Impossible. Interesting. Oh, okay.
So he and Robert Justman. Robert Justman was very intimate with Star Trek as far as what he did on the show.
He was Roddenberry's assistant, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, Bob Justman. And so the two of them got together to write this book. And so, because all these other books have been written, all the stars already had their books, and from their point of view, and who's mad at whom, or who was doing what, that's fine. But I think that what Mr. Solo and Mr. Justman wanted to do was to just set the record straight on exactly what Star Trek was. If you wanted to understand both the business of television production back then, and what it took to actually keep that program on the air, and all of the intricate pieces and people that made it happen. That's what this book is. It's not very glamorous, it's not very sexy, but it is filling in a lot of things. Because I got to tell you, I've been a Star Trek fan probably longer than just almost all of you, with the exception of maybe one of you. I've been alive. And I've had the opportunity to read as many books, and starting out with the making of Star Trek, and going into Bijou's book and Leonard Nimoy's books, William Shatner's books. I've read them all. And I gotta say, if you really want to understand from a business point of view and from a creative point of view what Star Trek was, this is your book. Inside Star Trek, The Real Story.
Yeah, it's a history book. It's more of a history book than a tell-all. Yeah.
With all of the stuff to prove what they're saying. And they take no sides. I mean, there's some stuff in this book that runs counter to certain things that we have been told over the decades. And in my opinion, not everybody was the nicest. Although there were certain people that were nicer to the crew.
Mr. Shatner, like Mr. Shatner.
Yeah, Shatner and the crew got along. Shatner, and this is the same kind of thing I heard about Harrison Ford when I read a lot of the books about the Star Wars stuff. Harrison Ford felt very comfortable with the crew. Very comfortable with the crew. He's always got a kind word for them, laughing with them, cutting with them. That's the way Shatner was. Shatner was incredibly comfortable with the crew. But almost everyone else, with the exception of maybe DeForest Kelley, they were actors. So back then, what do you do when you're not working? You're in your trailer.
Yeah.
Right.
Shatner is the guy that would be out there just making jokes,
hanging out.
And some people got what he was about, and others didn't. And I will say this: out of everybody on that show, when the show finally ended and went into syndication, those first few years when you're getting paid syndication money, those are the best years you will have. Those are the biggest checks. Shatner kept none of that.
Really?
Yeah. See, this is the part that a lot of the co-stars didn't tell you because they were too busy being mad at him for not going to the conventions. They were telling fans that, they were trying to imply, I should say, that Shatner had no time. Let me tell you what actually happened. William Shatner and his wife got a divorce.
Yeah. He was living in a trailer right after the show ended, I believe.
And so they had 3 daughters. So he did what any man would do, which is, the wife and I can't be together anymore, but I got 3 kids to get raised. So he gave them all the money. That's what he did.
Yeah. So that's why he was struggling right after the show ended and stuff. So.
He struggled for a little bit. I mean, being the face of a television show that was taking off in syndication. I mean, by 1970, 71, 72, that is the sweet spot for how popular this show became. And he took advantage of it. He started doing TV show appearances. He'd shoot pilots. He did whatever he had to do to make the money that he needed to make in order to house and clothe and feed his kids.
And he was in a lot of B movies in the 70s too, wasn't he?
He did all kinds of stuff. I mean, he was in Columbo. I think he did like 2 guest shots on Columbo.
2 guest shots, yep.
And then he did like
Tattletales, the TV show, game show.
Yep. He did quite a few game shows. Because, they pay you to show up. And he did lots of TV show pilots, one of which was the Barbary Coast, which I thought was a really cool idea for a show. I wish that had gone beyond the few episodes they ended up having. Because it looked like Shatner was having a ball doing that show.
Oh, yeah.
And then, of course, the animated series, Star Trek, and then behind the scenes, all the negotiations for the return of the series.
Phase 2.
Yeah. So this is all what? This is all before 1975.
Yeah. That's true.
People got to understand, when Star Trek the Motion Picture came out, Star Trek had only been off the air 10 years. Just 10 years. And when you really think about it, Shatner, Nimoy, and Kelly had only been away from Star Trek maybe a few years. Because again, if you count the work they did for the animated series,
73, 74.
Yeah, 73, 74. And again, The television show that stopped Star Trek from being a success on Saturday morning, they didn't anticipate that Hanna-Barbera would unleash upon the world Super Friends.
Mhm.
And both those shows ran at the same time on Saturday mornings. So, Super Friends got a lot of kids watching it. It was the main reason why I never really got a chance to watch too many episodes when they were broadcast of Star Trek. I was too busy watching Batman and Superman.
Mhm.
But go ahead.
But it's interesting how he sat back and say, that was 10 years
Yeah.
between the series to the motion picture.
Mhm.
And think about this. This year is like 10 years before Star Trek comes out. And you can see with Leslie Nielsen, actually, I see more of Pike in Commander Adams than I see Kirk.
He's more no nonsense. Like
Right.
like you said, he's got a little bit. There's a little bit of, like I said earlier, there's a little bit of Picard in him too. Like he literally cuts off when Morbius keeps repeats his message saying, "Hey, please don't come down here," blah blah blah. So
and when you watch Captain Horatio Hornblower, it's Gregory Peck's performance as Horatio Hornblower that is very much. I mean, that movie really is a lot like what Kirk would be. It had the Kirk attitude and the Kirk sensibilities and the way that the his officers would get with him and try to plan stuff. There's a scene where the ship's been taken over. Spoiler alert. And you see all the main characters kind of huddling together, trying to figure out how to take back the ship, and that has a very Star Trek feel. You get that sense of these are all people that have sailed together for years. They know every inch of that ship. They know what each other's capable of, and it's amazing. If you've never seen that movie, watch it. Trust me.
I have it in my window right now. I'll have to see where I can watch it and stuff. I want to see this now.
In a sense, you got the same thing with this crew. It is the same thing. It's a small, intimate crew.
Yep.
They've been together, traveling throughout there. They know each other intimately on what to do, their skills, their talents, and especially
I think they're
when
Commander
crew
Adams.
complement of 20, I think.
Commander Adams even brings up that he's got a boatload of young kids almost that they're almost like they just came out of boot and they immediately got put on his ship, and he's very protective over them. He is as almost as the father figure he should be. These are my men, and they're very young and they're very impressionable, and he's going to do what he has to do to protect them.
Yep.
Yeah, it's like, and they're out there. They've been out in space for over a year just to travel from Earth to Altair, and there's no women and stuff. So hence why he says this. Hence why he says this to Altera down the line and stuff, because of so that they don't do anything stupid with her.
well, exactly. And and anybody who remembers Leslie Nielsen as Driven or Dr. Umack or anything, or all his comedic works. Take a look at the strong talent that he has as his leading character, the seriousness. Of course, when the cameras go off, he's doing the fart noises and being a cut up on the set, which he was always known for. Just what a great actor Leslie Nielsen was.
Yeah. I grew up at a time before he was known for comedy, so I remember seeing him playing mainly heavies on a lot of episodic television shows, and so when the opportunity came along for Leslie Nielsen to do Airplane, that was a revelation to me, because that literally is like, take your favorite movie bad guy and have them start doing comedy.
Yeah.
What was important though too, and what made Airplane great, was the fact that Leslie Nielsen was playing it straight with all the insanity. Or everybody was, actually.
Yeah.
So they're acting like this is a serious film with all the insanity around. So that's where you're getting his natural, all those talents, Peter Graves, all coming out there with that.
Well, they were doing a near almost shot-for-shot remake of the movie that they were spoofing.
Yeah, 0 hour.
Airport, I believe. It was Airport,
No, 0
I think.
hour.
Or...
0
Yeah,
hour.
0
0
hour.
hour.
Canadian
Oh,
film,
0 hour.
Which,
Okay.
which was, oddly enough, filmed roughly about this time.
In the 50s?
Yeah.
Okay. We got to put her in a hospital. Well, what is it? A hospital. It's a big building with patients, but that's not important right now.
Right now.
I love. He's great. He's so great in this. He's so great in Airplane. Just the Shirley comment just makes me. I always repeat that to people whenever someone says Shirley to me. I'm like, don't call me Shirley.
That movie was such an out of the box hit that it was literally just a shock how big that movie was when it hit, because nobody saw this coming. Nobody
Shatner was
saw
in the
this coming.
sequel, I believe, which
Yes,
I
he
still have
was.
not seen. I still have not seen Airplane 2, but Shatner apparently
That's
was in
okay.
Airplane 2.
And
Okay.
I will say this though, I just think that the Zuckers were freaking geniuses to do what they did, and then to turn around and tell Leslie Nielsen and do a television series after all of this stuff, and they came out with Police Squad, which unfortunately for that show, not many people saw, but that the opening credits and how they made fun of a lot of the police procedural shows of the 1960s and 70s. Oh my goodness. I mean, just with the opening credits, I love that. It's like they have this thing where for the first 2 to 3 episodes, you would have the opening of the show. You'd have the big thing with the lights, and you'd see, just like in the movie version, you'd see the lights on top of the police car, and they'd be dry. And I think for the first episode, I think their first cameo was William Shatner.
No, actually, it was Lauren Green.
Okay, it was Lauren Green.
Lauren
Now, William Shatner was the one where he's in the restaurant, and it's
Right.
like tonight's guest star, William Shatner. You see,
Shatner.
he's eating, and he looks up, and he dives down, and you see the bullet holes. And he gets back up after the car is driven off. I think Lauren Green was the one where the car comes around the corner, and the body gets pushed out, and Lauren
He's
Green
clutching the
rolls, and he happens to roll face up so you could see him.
If I remember correctly, Lauren Green is from Battlestar and Bonanza, right? He's the
Bonanza,
lead?
yep.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. All right.
He's and the other thing about Lauren Green you got to understand is he's also Canadian, like William Shatner,
And Leslie Nielsen.
and Leslie Nielsen, and but the thing about it is, even though these people were listed as guest stars, that you saw them in the opening credits, they're not in the episode. That's joke one. And then when they would go, and tonight's episode is, you'd go a shot in the dark, but then on the on-screen graphic said something different, like 2 in the hand. You have to be really, really watching.
Oh, yeah, you had to watch this show. It was like, so I watched an Airplane. Absolutely. And again, Leslie Nielsen bringing that seriousness in there. And of course, Alan North in there. And Peter Lupus from Mission Impossible.
Mission Impossible, yeah.
Yep.
It was a funny show, but it didn't run that long during the summer.
They only had 4 episodes they aired. They canceled it
Yep.
before the last 2. And then when they did the reruns, they finally did release the other 2 episodes.
Yep. And then when they had the movies are just a dirtier version of the television series. There's humor that you couldn't get away with on television that you could get away with in film. So
Nice
that's all
Beaver.
they did. Yeah, that's funny. So,
But seriously, if you love the Naked Gun films, you have to see the series. Actually, I think the Police Squad series was better.
yes,
Far better.
yes,
And the writers they had in there, I mean, you had Newbaum Kirk from Hollywood Nights. He wrote what's his name again? He was
Robert
also
Wall.
Batman. Well, yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, he wrote 2 of the episodes.
Oh,
In that.
Robert Wall in that movie Hollywood Nights just slays me.
Yeah.
Slays me. I just okay. You got to let the old guys talk for a moment. But for those of you that enjoyed Animal House, Hollywood Nights was a kind of Animal House-esque type show. Type movie, except that it was set, I think, in California.
Yeah, you can kind of take Animal House and American Graffiti and put them together.
That's basically it. Everything that can happen in one night. And Robert Wall plays this guy who is just... Everybody has that one guy in high school that was just a consummate cut-up. I mean, the dude was just a constant... That's who he played. And so the scene with the punch is my favorite. Where it's just somebody took the punch, and you got Newbaum Kirk, and he's out there with his 4 friends. One of them was a surfer dude, and they're all standing around, and you can tell they're pissing, but you don't know what they're doing. And then they all zip up, and then the other guy, and one of the guys bends over and he picks up, and it's a punch bowl. And they sneak it back inside. People start drinking out of it. And this female teacher's like, this tastes kind of familiar.
Yeah,
And you see all the guys that did it, they're banging on the glass because they weren't allowed to go to because it's during the big school dance, and he couldn't get in, so he's banging on the glass, and he's going, "It's me, that's me."
Oh man. So I'll have to check that out. I'll have to check that out.
We're corrupting these kids. We took over
I know.
didn't we, Keith?
I know. I mean, come on. I mean, who else am I going to tell about all this stuff to? Come on.
Exactly. I agree.
But to get it back to Forbidden Planet. Forbidden Planet was nominated for an Academy Award for its visual effects. And I think the big thing about this movie was, I think Roddenberry, was hoping that Star Trek would be more like this, in so much as that had they been given the money and the budget to do it, you would have seen certain things that you see little bits of in Star Trek's first season, especially its pilot, with the use of matte paintings and other things. They were trying to recreate a lot of really cool things, I think, that you had seen in several big science fiction and fantasy and or adventure movies. And to have any kind of a B movie back then, you had to give your audience something. You had to make it worth it for them to sit down in that seat and watch it after paying the ticket price. And I think what Roddenberry was wanting to do was kind of the same thing. But he was wanting to make it more cerebral, because the more adventurous aspects of a movie, even like this, had already been done, and done pretty well by the CBS series Lost in Space.
Right. But even though this is a very cerebral film, I mean,
you
see elements of this in with the cage and all that. I mean,
yes,
this is hardcore, deep down cerebral science fiction.
Yes,
groundbreaking. I mean, honestly, this is MGM Studios.
Yes,
you can't help but figure that this success of this had them down the road and say, "Okay, Stanley and Arthur, go ahead and do your little science fiction film."
Yeah, and when that scene where they're down below inside the planet, that scene where you're seeing the intricacies of everything down there was very inspirational to the design. There we are. Was very inspirational to the design and workings of Epsilon 5. 3. Epsilon 3 is. I thought it was Epsilon 5 for Babylon 5.
The planet. That's the planet that Babylon 5 is
near,
orbiting around, or near.
Yeah,
I know. Yeah, this exact same shot. You know, as you see the bridge from far above, and you see they look like elevators.
Yeah. This is all a matte painting, and you have the 3 figures that are walking along on the only portion of it that is actually the live action version. And this is what I think Roddenberry was hoping to do with Star Trek. Now, this same kind of scene right here was also, they also did a tribute to this in the first season of The Orville. They had a scene very much like this. And again,
I'm trying to remember now which episode.
that shows you how influential this movie was to an entire generation of filmmakers and science fiction enthusiasts. Go ahead.
Look at that picture. Would you
Yeah.
actually think this is from 1956?
Oh,
Now, who was the ILM of his day back in this time?
You didn't have ILM. You had just.
You did
this
have
was
an ILM.
MGM. This
There
was
was an
MGM.
ILM. There was an ILM of his day, and that was Walt Disney.
yeah.
Oh, okay.
Walt Disney lent one of his animators to do the special effects for this film. Now, note the important word. This is very important. He lent one of his people to go there, because at that time you were contracted to a studio. You didn't have cross pollination of studios. It took negotiations. It took a lot to have somebody from one studio working for like a competition, and Walt Disney was more than gracious to have him work on this film because he knew what it was. This is why the special effects was so great, because he had that Disney back when Disney was magic.
Didn't they do any science fiction themselves, Disney, at this time?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously
at
they did
that
the Black
time?
Hole back in the 70s.
They did
but
Black Hole later.
Yeah.
Black
had
Hole
more
was
fantasy.
1978, 1979, almost 1980, really.
Yeah, but you had more fantasy with stuff with Disney. So you had, of course, Mary Poppins, Bedknobs and Broomsticks, all that stuff. When you got into the 70s, you had stuff like Escape to Witch Mountain and the various. Well, of course, that was post Walt. Walt was passed away, but where Walt was doing more fantasy, this was a chance for one of his guys to go out there and actually do a hardcore science fiction film.
Yeah.
And take these concepts and bring it to life. That's one of the things that really built that.
And you know what? I mentioned this in my review. You know what else this makes me think of? And this should everybody should know this one: the Death Star shaft in the original Star Wars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially
Well,
especially when Obi-Wan is just like holding onto the tractor beam platform and stuff, and you see like the entirety of the shaft. It had that same feel.
Another famous matte painting is the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Mm-hmm.
At the very end when the Ark is being put away, that's really a matte painting. Okay, another one is History of the World. They used matte painting for all of the Roman stuff that they did. Mm-hmm. And how that works is so incredibly. I mean, it is an amazing technique to be able to paint on glass, and then you leave a section, undone, and that's the part that you would actually film if you were filming outside on location. You would have the glass set up in front of the camera, with the only visible part being a section, from which you could actually see the actors. Now, for this scene, for Forbidden Planet, I think what they ended up doing was you had the matte painting there, and I think they just went ahead and filmed those actors from a distance, and then just sort of merged the two in there.
Yeah, basically the only real thing probably in that whole thing is that bridge.
Yep.
Everything else is a painting.
Okay.
And,
It's funny. It's funny. Unlike Star Wars, and we see this and like a few seconds later, there's actually railings. They're really short railings, but there's railings there. Unlike Star Wars, where it's completely unsafe. Just had to say it.
Well, there's a reason for that. It heightens the adventure level, the
That's right.
excitement to design
Exactly.
certain things to be dangerous or dangerous looking.
I thought they just didn't want those stormtroopers leaning against the railing because you got to stand up and do your job. No leaning, no sitting.
Yeah, we'd be
Stormtroopers.
leaning all day. They'd say we'd be leaning all day.
Leaning all day.
I love Family Guy.
There are so many good films that are able to use matte paintings Whether you're talking the 1931 Dracula, 1933 King Kong, of course, Modern Times, which is Charlie Chaplin's big movie. That one, if you've never seen it, is an amazing use of matte painting.
Isn't that the one where he goes down the clock, or he goes into like a pipe or in a clock or something? He's kind of like Mario in a sense.
Well, this is no. That's the one where he's
or City Lights.
Roller
skating.
And it looks like he's about to go over the edge.
He's going to go over the edge, and it's actually a really complex matte painting shot.
Right.
Is what that is. And then...
you even had matte painting for with Gone with the Wind and all those films. Even stuff that wasn't science fiction. They brought out the matte paintings.
Nottingham Castle in The Adventures of Robin Hood in 1938 was also a matte painting. Oh, my favorite. North by Northwest. Mount Rushmore in the United Nations building and the house on Mount Rushmore. That film, North by Northwest, is an important film because without it, you would not have the James Bond movies.
Yeah, they literally asked Hitchcock, "Hey, you wanna direct? You wanna direct Doctor No?" He's like, "Heck no! I already made it. I already did it. I already made a spy movie. It's called North by Northwest."
and the irony is that the template for how the Bond films would be was established in North by Northwest, and that you already have the villain. And the villain with the henchman, who's usually someone that either has some special ability or blah, 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 blah. Well, in this case, the original first henchman, or main right-hand man, was played by an actor who would eventually take over the lead, I should say, would be one of the leads in Mission Impossible.
Martin Landau.
That's right.
You know what's funny? The main villain in North by Northwest doesn't die. They simply arrest him.
Yep.
Which is unheard of for a Bond movie.
True. The Bond movies had to change it up a little bit, you know.
Yeah.
And then you had
the Bond movies were the first time you saw a good guy unapologetically kill a bad guy. In Dr. No, when he has that silencer and he shoots the guy with the spider, I can't remember his name.
The Professor Dent.
The Professor, yes. The heroes didn't do that. Good guys didn't do that back then. So to see a hero unapologetically gun down a bad guy and be like, "Oh, well, so sad, so sorry."
Yeah, he literally says, "Yeah, that's a Smith and Wesson, and you've had your sex," and he just shoots him, just shoots him twice.
Also,
it's crazy.
Getting back to matte painting for just a second, you know how you were telling the story about how a matte painter was lent from Disney to this movie. Okay, that was Harrison Ellenshaw.
Yep.
Who I had first heard about watching Star Wars, and turns out that he not only worked for Disney for several years, but then he turned around and went to work for George Lucas's Industrial Light and Magic, where he was in charge of creating several of the matte paintings for a lot of their movies.
Well, it can't be denied that, George Lucas had to look at that going, I want this, I want this, I want this. How can we do, how can we do it even better?
Yeah,
so, go on.
This kind of makes me think of the tractor beam platform that Obi-Wan goes on a little bit.
Well, I think during the formative phases of both writing and how he was going to actually put Star Wars together, I'm thinking George was at the very least initially thinking that they would have to do this, that you'd have to use a lot of matte paintings in order to convey how big everything was and his ideas and so on and so forth. And so hiring any of the Ellenshaws, you were going to get quality. I mean, that both the father and the son were incredible matte painters. Their work is worth a lot of money today.
And what a lost art. I mean, everyone going with CGI, It's like, look at this.
Yeah.
You can appreciate this. I mean, nothing against the CGI artists, nothing
Yes.
against them, but you can't help but just appreciate. Look at that scope. Look at the focal points. Everything on that is like, this is art. This is you
It's
can
beautiful.
almost see yourself getting wrapped right into that. That is for real, even though it's a painting.
Yeah, and this kind of work is definitely expensive. Certain television shows would use matte paintings. I mean, I think they ended up using matte paintings in Time Tunnel
Yep.
because there's
matte
no way.
paintings?
Oh, go ahead.
Didn't they use matte paintings in Star Trek with all the backgrounds,
Oh, yes.
especially the
Yeah.
the
Initially-
fortress in the cage,
Yes,
the fortress in the
yes.
cage, the
That
Delta
goes-
Vega and Where No Man's Gone Before. I
That's
think-
right.
Right.
That gets back to what I was saying before. That is part of the reason why, Roddenberry looking at a film like this thinking, we should do this. But that was back when I think he was hoping to get the budget that he was asking for the show, which he didn't. He didn't get that money. Part of the reason why Star Trek looked the way that it did was because they didn't have the money. Ultimately, Desilu and decided that all the money was going to go towards Mission Impossible, and that they would just make Star Trek kind of on a shoestring budget, which is the reason why they ended up the people that were in charge of making many of the props for the show would be stealing stuff out of the dumpster for Mission Impossible. So if you line up the episodes of Mission Impossible, you wait a week and line up the episode of Star Trek that came after that, you'll see a lot of props, sometimes even certain guest stars, that go from one show to the other.
Oh yeah, you had an episode of Mission Impossible with two actors from Star Trek. You had John Colicos and Michael Forrest in a single episode. And of course, there was. Sorry, go ahead.
Prop stealing and prop sharing is nothing new. Out of this film, the props and such were used, and models were used in Twilight Zone and many other TV shows. The uniforms, all across the board. I mean, look how often Robbie the Robot was seen throughout the decades.
This was all pretty expensive for its time. And so, even though the movie was well loved, you notice they never really made a sequel. And for all of the money that they spent, they probably had to get something out of it. And short of reusing matte shots, which never really is done. That's never done. Because it's usually a matte shot is pretty much synonymous with whatever movie it appears in, depending on what the shot actually is.
Star Trek reused them.
They
reused the cage fortress in Requiem for Methuselah. That's what I remember. And they reused Delta Vega as well in Danger of the Mind. Yeah. Same season.
Minor changes. Yeah.
What I mean is, from one film or television show to another film or television show, it's hard.
Okay.
You can't get away with that. But within a show in and of itself, yes, you can. But it's again. I think had they had more money, I think this approaches what they were wanting to do with Star Trek.
Can you imagine seeing this every week, something like this?
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
I mean, even today with all the gimcrackery, it's like I'd rather see this weekly like this than what we're getting now for special effects.
Oh
yeah,
geez.
this is way more aesthetically pleasing in my opinion.
And a lot of the times it's not about the money. The reason why you get some of these good movies, some of these classics, some of these cult classics is because they didn't have any money. That's why they turned out as loved and adored as they are, because people had to work their ass off to get it done and come up with something out of nowhere. Oh, we turned this styrofoam cup into a laser beam and shit. It was shit like that. The inventiveness and the scrounging and all of that made it what it was.
Yes.
And also forced the writers to, especially with Star Trek and stuff, it forced the writers to write compelling episodes that just take place on the ship and stuff. And same here,
and that was
compelling
always
stories.
going to be a thing for them. I mean, the thing about Star Trek, an additional thing you need to understand about Star Trek, is that Star Trek really was not that well liked amongst people who the science fiction professionals.
No.
They personally didn't care for the show. I think they cared for Lost in Space even less, but they personally didn't care for the show because it was trying to do two things at once.
Speaking of Lost in Space, really quickly, the robot in Lost in Space is not the same as Robbie, right?
No.
It's a totally different design.
Totally
I forget.
different.
Totally different design.
Because I can't remember. I cannot remember what that robot
Just
was like.
Google B9 robot and that'll come up.
But Robbie did make 2 appearances on
Yes.
Lost in Space.
Yes, he did.
Really?
Yeah. Lost in Space, in spirit, is more along the lines of the pulpy adventure science fiction that Hollywood really understood.
Right.
I mean, science fiction, in and of itself, is something that not a lot of people are that familiar with. It's rare to get it. Okay? Science fiction is not just, it isn't really just spaceships and lasers and robots and it's not just that. But it's what Hollywood understood because, their limited understanding resulted in so many movies appearing to be the same or having the same elements. So they had a very limited understanding of what science fiction truly was. And when you look at a lot of the novels, a lot of the books that were being praised as some of the best that science fiction ever had, you're reading books and seeing stuff in those books that are almost 20 or 30 years ahead socially and story-wise than a lot of other stuff that you were seeing come out of Hollywood that was science fiction. I look at a lot of what Hollywood created as being closer to being sci-fi than science fiction. Okay? Very poppy. Limited in its ability to be able to communicate many of the stories and ideas that many science fiction novels have. That isn't to say that it couldn't, but it was very limited. That is the one thing outside of what Rod Serling was able to do with Twilight Zone that you could definitely say about Gene Roddenberry and Star Trek, which is the ideas and the kinds of stories that they went after were heads and shoulders above what they were able to afford to be able to present people. That was a show that you literally had to pay attention to.
Just like this movie. I mean, really, this movie was heads and shoulders above anything that had really been put out.
Yeah.
And you think about the budget on this. This was literally the equivalent of one of the big summer blockbuster films of our era. And it did a good return on this. And the biggest cost on this film was Robbie. He was the most expensive prop that they had to make.
$200,000, if I'm not mistaken, and that back then that was a lot of fucking money.
Yeah.
How did they get this made? I'm curious because I remember because everyone knows the story of Star Wars, how it was really hard for Lucas to sell his idea of Star Wars. How was this movie made? I mean, obviously this is a play on the Tempest.
Yes.
Shakespeare's The Tempest.
Well, that's it.
So
that's exactly it. What you're doing is you're taking a very a familiar story. In this case, Shakespeare's The Tempest, and you're using it as the basis of something else. And
unlike today, people knew what you were talking about when you said The Tempest, because even kids in high school were being taught Shakespeare.
Yeah, you see, education's different now than it was back then. Back then, you actually had a lot of classic literature being taught in schools. There are books that are no longer taught in schools that everybody had to read. And so everybody had a base and a basic understanding of what classic literature was. You were made familiar with Shakespeare. You were made familiar with I think, Burroughs and, and the importance of Edgar Rice Burroughs.
The Princess and Mars
Oh, everything.
author.
Everything.
Okay.
Everything. Yeah.
You got to remember, literary wise, Edgar Rice Burroughs was, for his time and what he did, he was like a combination of Steven Spielberg, George Lucas, Christopher Nolan,
Mm-hmm.
and the excitement and the kinds of stories that he told. If you are a fan of any of those types of movies growing up, if you had lived during the turn of the century into the early 20th century, that's what you would have gotten out of those books, because he was able to write all kinds of stuff like that. That's the reason why Edgar Rice Burroughs, as far as I know, is the only author to have done such a good job entertaining people that they named an entire city after one of his characters.
Which one?
Tarzana, California.
Mm-hmm.
Oh. Oh yeah, Tarzan. Of course, he created Tarzan. I know. That's right. That's right.
And you think about it, that era that he's coming out with Edgar Rice Burroughs, he also had H.G. Wells, you had Jules Verne, you had Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, you had all these.
And those were already big names by the time Edgar Rice Burroughs came on the scene. But Burroughs was the new master at that time. He was the new big talent on the scene, and so beginning at towards the beginning of the 20th century, he's out there just getting it done. He's out there just churning out stories, and go ahead.
And what would happen if Howard would have lived? If he wouldn't committed suicide?
Oh, Howard had lived. Oh my goodness.
Mm-hmm.
That's just so much. There's a lot of talent. A lot of people really need to go back and rediscover a lot of this literature. You know, the Conan books alone are amazing. The Edgar Rice Burroughs books. Edgar Rice Burroughs is one of the first people to ever have a connected universe of books. He connected.
Really?
Yeah, he connected all of his stories. The first book of every single one of his literary franchises begins with how it connects to who he is as the author. So whether you're talking Tarzan or A Princess of Mars for the John Carter series, or even the Carson of Venus series, or Pellucidar, which is his underground series, it all connects to one particular person whose name just happens to be Edgar Rice Burroughs.
And I'll be honest, I've never heard of him until like a few years ago when I started listening to, all you guys on YouTube talking about like classic literature and stuff. I've never seen John Carter, and I had no idea it was one of the earliest ideas of a space opera.
Yeah, well, look. You've seen the movie Wonder Woman with Gal Gadot, right?
Mm-hmm.
The scene where Diana goes to Man's World and she wants to go to the war, and she's with Steve, and they travel and they end up meeting up with his buddies. They end up with his buddies, travel overseas, and meet with the big Native American guy. And it's the scene at night where they're around the fire, and Steve's dividing up all these goodies that he brought for him, of which he brought Burroughs. That's the Burroughs that he's talking about. Edgar Rice Burroughs books.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Wow, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, because he was that big. You can't make a movie about the 80s without talking about Steven Spielberg or George Lucas. Well, you can't talk about adventure books from that decade, from that era, without Edgar Rice Burroughs. That's how big he was. He was
a rock
big.
star.
He was. He was like the Beatles combined with the Rolling Stones combined with Elvis combined. I mean, he was everything. That's how big he was.
And that's the problem we have now. We don't have these generations reading these world building, saga building, lore building books and stories today. They We don't have that. They don't understand these concepts. That's why our entertainment today sucks so bad. That's why a
Yeah.
film like this, The Forbidden Planet, is just so uninspiring. I mean, how many people of this era hasn't seen this movie because, well, it's a '50s film. I don't want to go watch an old '50s film. You don't know what you're
Okay.
missing.
Okay, Loki, you have to jump off. So, you have any
Okay.
final thoughts? Even though we didn't really go through the movie that much, but do you have any final thoughts on this classic, this pre-Trek classic?
This is one of the greatest science fiction movies ever made, and it is a science fiction movie. It's not like sci-fi action. There is some elements of horror with the id, but it's still psychological. And if you haven't seen this movie, get your ass out there and watch this movie. If you can watch it in a theater, if you ever have the opportunity to watch this in a theater, go and see it in a theater, especially if it's a drive-in. You will not be disappointed. It is an awesome movie. And thank you, brother. Thank you for having me on. Thank you, Keith. Thank you, Baron. It was just so good to talk to you guys. Always good to talk to you, Keith. And take care, guys.
All right,
care,
thank
Loki.
you. I'd love to have you on again.
Hell yeah. Yeah, anytime, brother.
All right, take care.
You too. Bye.
No, as we were saying, everything's connected. I mean, when you look at, say, let's see, this is the early 1950s. So you're also seeing a change in comic books, okay? And by comics, I mean DC Comics, because Marvel still had problems. The Marvel that you know, when I say Marvel Comics, to anyone listening to this, picture a character in your head, and I guarantee you that character does not exist at the time this movie was out. Everything you know about Marvel Comics, everything that has become popular, only became popular after 1960.
How long was Stan Lee with the company? Was he in the company
Stan
in
Lee
the 40s?
he joined in the 1940s. He ended up replacing Jack Kirby and Joe Simon, who were the creators of Captain America.
Okay.
He ended up working under those guys. Those guys were hot. Those guys were huge. They were rock stars. And Stan Lee ended up marrying the cousin of the wife of the publisher.
Huh.
And so something happened. Jack Kirby, Joe Simon ended up leaving the company. Stan Lee took over their job, and he kept it for the most part until Marvel went out of business. And then a few years later, he brought it back. And this time, he put it under his purview and had everybody train with his method of creating comics and having the idea to make sure that all the characters pass through the Stan Lee filter.
But I mean, you can't help but feel that this film here helped inspire stuff like the New Gods with Jack Kirby.
Yeah.
And some of the works.
What I was trying to get to is that one of the names that you normally do not hear about nowadays is Julius Schwartz.
No.
Okay? Julius Schwartz in 1939 was one of the people that was behind the Worldcon convention in New York. Okay? Worldcon is the convention of conventions for science fiction, fantasy, the whole 9 yards, okay?
Where they present the Hugo Awards, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then that whole sad puppy issue a few years ago.
So, the 1939 Worldcon is important for two reasons. The first being that Julius Schwartz is one of the people that organized it. The second is cosplay was invented that year.
Doc Smith was one of the first cosplayers.
Who did he cosplay as?
What was that character he cosplayed?
I thought it was.
Was it one of his characters?
I thought it was Forrest Ackerman was the first.
Well, Corey
cosplayer.
Ackerman.
Yeah, him and
Corey
his
Ackerman.
girlfriend, because they dressed as characters from Things to Come.
Yeah.
And she did all the sewing and he did the modeling. And those are great. And when you look at the picture, it's an amazing costume, except that 1939, that was a heat wave that year.
Oh no!
So, but the thing that I was trying to get to is that Julius Schwartz was a guy that was already an agent for several top names within science fiction literature, right?
Mm-hmm.
So within another 10 to 12 years, he'd be working for DC Comics. So when DC Comics started changing over everything in the 1950s and became, all about space and all of its space characters, even Batman went to space, Superman went, that was because of Julius Schwartz. Because you had a real sci-fi guy, science fiction guy, working for DC Comics. So DC Comics became not only known for superheroes, but for their science fiction. And they have an incredibly diverse catalog of science fiction type characters. Okay, trust me on this. This is one of the downsides about owning an IP and not understanding what's in it. Warner Brothers, the way that it was prior to today, at this hour, Warner Brothers, prior to all of that, those guys were just some of the biggest idiots because they had no earthly idea of what they owned and what was contained in their vaults and what's in their IP. There is so much material. And for anyone that has never read DC Comics, check out all of their 1950 stuff. Mm-hmm. Check it out. Check out the stories that they were doing. Stuff like you had, of course, you had Captain Comet was a good example. Space Cabbie. You had, I think, what was the other one? We were talking earlier about the New Gods, although that would be a little bit later in the decade. But the expansive nature of the New Gods alone and what it's added to everything. All of those stories, Hawkman, the way they took the basic ideas of earlier comic book characters that they had, Hawkman, Green Lantern, and the Flash, and changed them. Prior to this decade, Hawkman, Green Lantern, and the Flash were not what you know them as now. Mm-hmm. Green Lantern was just a guy with a magic ring, and it was a magic ring, not a ring from some other planet where you became. That was not the story of Green Lantern. The Flash also was a completely different person and story. Even Hawkman was a completely different story. And so they reinvented all these characters to make them fresh and new for a whole new generation. So by the 1950s, instead of Alan Scott being the owner of a major media outlet, newspaper, radio show in Gotham City, him and his lovely fiancée, lovely lady, he's now Hal Jordan. And he's a space cop. Because, the 1950s were all about space and aliens and all that stuff. And so DC Comics played into that.
Taking a little bit of that Doc Smith Lensman with that.
Yeah, I heard Green Lantern kind of ripped off of Lensman quite a bit.
I wouldn't say rip off, but influenced.
Yeah, influence.
Homage.
A lot of books did that. I mean, you had Space Cadet, Robert Heinlein's Space Cadet, kind of takes some of the same thing, you know?
Right.
But you have the Green Lantern Corps. You have eventually the Legion of Superheroes. You have, just all that stuff. Any of the DC comic stuff coming into the into that period of time, the 1950s, which also was the period of time that was very influential for Batman. Because without the 1950s Batman, you would not have the Batman 66 show.
Mm-hmm.
Because that entire television show is all based on all of the Batman stories and adventures of the 1950s.
Mm-hmm.
Man, we are just shooting all over the place with this.
We are, aren't we?
So I consider this all the background behind why Forbidden Planet came to be and stuff. All this space, all this influence.
Yeah, this is what fans were into when they went to go see this movie. If you were a young person in the 1950s, this is all part of what you were reading. This is all part of what you were listening to. You still had certain programs on the radio. They were still had certain things like that. But for the most part, it's comics, comic strips, all that stuff. You know?
And really, as good as the Day of the Earth stood still, a lot of the stuff was not evolving around the ship itself. It was all about interacting with the people of Earth at that time. A great, really thought up adult science fiction, mature science fiction film.
And especially if you're really familiar with history and stuff, you understand what's going on. Cold War, obviously, Soviet Union, U.S., relations going down the crapper and stuff.
Oh yeah.
And that was the reason for the problems in Day of the Earth System. I thought it was brilliant.
But if you were reading Doc Smith, if you were reading Asimov at the time, if you were reading Clark and all these people, reading these pulp novels, this is what you were picturing. You finally, what was in your mind's eye is now on the screen, which is why this was such a staggering, assault of the senses, why this film was so influential, is for once, finally, Hollywood brought out something that we were reading. This is what we were wanting. This is what we've been starving for. And that's why it's such a hard impact. And let's face it, that picture right there that we've seen, I love to have that hanging over my mantelpiece right now.
Yep.
I mean, look at that. How beautiful that is.
The C-57D.
Exactly. And then all the people around it in the planetscape and the moons and all that. So, this film, as much as you had these other films that were so great, and like, as they sat back and said, The Day of the Earth Stood Still, that was originally going to be in color, but they couldn't afford it. That's how low that budget. They finally put a budget into something. And they developed, they produced. And its fingerprints is all over cinema after that. Whether it is 2001, whether it is Star Trek TV show, whether it's Star Wars, the Star Trek movies, many of the things that you saw in the 80s. The fingerprints. And the fingerprints of this should be today, too. Unfortunately, those fingerprints have been wiped. People need to go back and look at this stuff and say, oh, now I get it.
See, this is all playing in. Now, remember, at this time, George Lucas is a young man. He'll watch a lot of this stuff, but for the most part, he wasn't really the biggest fan of a lot of stuff. I mean, he read a lot, but for the most part, I mean, this is the kind of stuff that you saw at the drive-ins. Many of the things that went into him telling a story like American Graffiti is what he was living at this point in time. And when he had his accident that nearly killed him, and if you ever look up pictures of that accident, the fact that he survived and is walking at his age, seemingly with no help, and that is the definition of a miracle.
Yeah,
that is the definition of. I can't even begin to tell. The first time I saw that picture was in his. I think it was in his biography that I read called Skywalking. That came out in '83, and I'm looking at that picture. It's like, whoa, he walked away from that.
James Dean's car looked better than that.
Oh my God, So, whoo.
So he got into a major car accident. I don't know even know anything about.
Yeah,
this.
he hit a tree. He
Holy crap.
almost literally merged his vehicle with a tree.
Ooh.
Yep, because he loved fast cars. And to burst the bubble of the mythology of George Lucas, everyone talks about how he was in the Campbell this, Campbell that, and all that crap. Gary Kurtz said it eloquently. He sat back and said that Lucas didn't get involved in Campbell until towards the end of Star Wars when he started actually reading it. The thing is Lucas had a lesson in Campbell. He had a lesson in Campbell by all the stories that he was reading. And he was reading Burroughs. He was seeing movies like this. He was with the Westerns. He was immersing himself in the lore of how the hero is, all that across the board. He wasn't reading it. He was experiencing it. And he took all that and brought it to Star Wars. And lo and behold, what he was doing in Star Wars is exactly what Campbell was saying.
Yep. Well, and also, he was a big fan of Flash Gordon.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
I mean, that's pretty much what he said, like in his initial VHS interviews when the tapes came out in the '90s. The ones that got me into Star Wars. That's how I knew, because he talked about, like, I think Buck Rogers and Flash Gordon mainly.
That was actually for a lot of people. That began it.
Yep.
Buck
he
Rogers
wanted to
and
do
Flash
Gordon.
Yeah.
He wanted to do Flash Gordon originally. He couldn't get the rights to it.
He couldn't get the rights.
Okay. So he was like Bender. Okay, fine. I'll do my own science fiction fantasy with blackjack and hookers.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, that is, in short, how George Lucas came up with all this. How he created Star Wars is that he wasn't allowed to do the thing that he originally wanted to do. And again, I often tell people, if you really want to understand what it was about Flash Gordon that George Lucas just felt so compelled to make a movie version, you need to see the original comic strip and the artwork that goes with it.
Oh.
Because watching the movie from 1980 does not do it justice. It is a fun movie. I will never take anything from that movie. Plus, it's got the music of Queen. How can you go wrong? Okay, but what I am saying is that if you truly want to understand the power of Flash Gordon and why, if you are a fan of Flash Gordon, why the 1980 movie? Oh yeah, there you are. You the man. Why?
Wait, let me get you. All right, here you go. Solo.
If you really want to understand, what you need to truly experience is the original comics or comic strips, and you need to read them, and you need to experience that incredible artwork. Oh my goodness, that is some of the best artwork. You could take almost between Flash Gordon and Prince Valiant. I mean, you know how we were talking earlier about matte paintings. You could take any panel out of any one of those comics and blow it up into a painting that would look good on your wall.
Oh, yeah.
Is how well that artwork was.
When was this? When were these made? Were these made in the 20s or the early 30s? 'Cause I know the serials came out in the late 30s.
Yeah, it was the 30s and 40s.
Okay, so they were still making comics. So they were still making comics when they were making the serials. Oh, okay.
Well, yeah. Well, there were Saturday morning. There's Sunday morning funnies. You'd have the funny pages, and you would have that Prince Valiant comic, and it's like you're reading literally a graphic novel. I mean, you didn't have the word bubbles. You just had everything written in the panels telling you what the story is, along with the artwork with Prince Valiant.
Were the serials? Were the serials adapted from these comics at all, or were they kind of separate?
They were Hollywood adaptations.
Yeah,
which meant that they tried as well as they could do.
Right.
But you couldn't get everything. And when you read the comic strips, when you read the comic books, the original stuff, you can see that the movie Flash Gordon is heavily influenced by the movie serials. With just a light dusting of the comics for effect.
Alex Raymond artwork.
Yeah.
If I remember right, yeah.
But I will say this: if if it were up to me, if I had the money, I would hire Peter Jackson to basically do what he did with the Lord of the Rings and just film stuff in New Zealand and make a Flash Gordon movie, a proper
Oh.
Flash Gordon movie.
Is he a fan of Flash?
I don't know, but I would hire him to do it anyway.
Oh, me too.
And then I would hire Guillermo del Toro's creature effects team, and that would be what I would spend my money on. And I'm telling you, the amount of imagination just within the Flash Gordon comics, the comic strips, really, from the newspaper. Oh my goodness! Oh my goodness!
And we can't really sell the old Buck Rogers either, because the old Buck Rogers comics and such also had their own great artwork and their great imagination and great looks of spaceships. Like Buck Rogers El Dorado. I mean, my God.
Mm-hmm.
Along with it. So,
the amount of imagination, though, with Flash Gordon, that is really the main basis of a lot of what fans enjoyed about Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You mixed in with what Edgar Rice Burroughs had created and a few other influential writers that George Lucas was able to get his hands on, including Isaac Asimov and his Foundation series.
Mm-hmm.
But Flash Gordon, you can see why Lucas wanted to make a Flash Gordon movie.
Yeah.
You know, and why I still think if that would be fantastic if somebody were to actually sit down to try to actually make a Flash Gordon movie. And again, I don't want to sound like I'm trying to be cruel here, but I would tell them just don't look at the serials and don't look at the 1980 movie. Stick strictly to the comic strips and comic books, the early stuff. You design everything you need's there, and just do it. And I'm telling you, fans would pick out things. You would see things that remind you of Star Wars and other things, which is, again, how much George Lucas really enjoyed it, you know? Yep. So, but, again, that's the fantasy element invading the science fiction. You know? This is, again, as I said before about Star Trek, there were actual, science fiction conventions were more about people who, more often than not, had a background in science, who would talk and discuss their favorite stories that have come out within the last year to 2 years. And they would often try to compare notes, who got it the closest to being correct to how we see it based on, our work in the labs. And so that became a lot of the discussions and stuff. And what we know science fiction conventions to be, how we perceive them now, how we are excited about them, a lot of that didn't really look the way that we expected to until the 1970s.
Speaking of Star Wars, doesn't this make you think of a certain thing that ends in wars?
Well, actually, believe it or not, what that kind of reminds me more of is Logan's Run.
Yep.
Really?
Yeah.
I only watched Logan's Run once a long time ago.
Oh, you need to rewatch that because with Logan's Run, of course, that was the first film that actually used holographic effects in the film. But in Logan's Run, of course, you take a look at how she's dressed in there. By the way, this is what kept Forbidden Planet from being released in Spain for many, many years, is her outfit, by the way. But you take a look at the outfit that the outfit she's wearing is kind of reminiscent of what you had with the ladies running around on Logan's Run. But they had that, of course, sequence where you could choose a lady to have dalliances with, because, of course, there wasn't true romantic relationships. And Michael York would go and they'd go through the thing where they cycle through the scene who you want to have, and then eventually, of course, Jenny came in on that one. But that kind of reminds me of Logan's Run with that holographic look and the outfit.
You know, I, I again, I, I. This is one of the few times I will ever say this, but I really wish Bryan Singer had been able to find backing for his reinterpretation of Logan's Run.
Oh yeah.
I really do, because I think that if it is to be believed from the from the special effects company that did a lot of the pre-viz work and other stuff with him, he has a pretty good mind and eye for science fiction. A lot of what we enjoyed about Battlestar Galactica, the version that we all like, many of the effects and designs were originally created for Bryan Fuller's version of Battlestar Galactica. And so it makes me think that, I wouldn't mind seeing his adaptation of Logan's Run.
So Bryan Fuller made or was part of Battlestar Galactica.
Bryan Singer. I'm sorry. Why do I keep saying Fuller?
Bryan Singer of Superman Returns and
Superman Returns and the X-Men films.
Okay.
After X2, after he was, I should say, while they were gearing up to do X2, Bryan and his production partner came to the United States, went to Universal, and got the green light to move into their new headquarters at Universal and start developing a Battlestar Galactica film. He grew up as a fan of the original series. So his idea was to take the original series and combine it with some all-new stuff. With the idea that what if the series just was still going on up to this point? And so what would the Cylons look like if they continued to evolve? What would all the ships and everything be like? And he was wanting to get as many of the original cast together as possible that would want to be a part of this, along with hiring some new talent to play, a lot of their heirs and sons and daughters and grandsons and stuff like that.
And this is totally different. This is totally separate from what Ronald D. Moore did.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, now that's the thing. There was a company that had worked with Bryan on the designs of the Cylons. And you can look that, you just Google it. And interesting enough, they look a lot like the Cylons that ended up on the Ronald D. Moore series.
The hell you say?
I know, right? And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that I think Universal, when they kicked him off the lot, kept a lot of their designs. And they just gave it to Ronald D. Moore. That's
Why not?
all.
I mean, yeah. Because you had about 3 different conflicting Battlestar reboots. You had the one that Glenn Larson wanted to do, and you virtually wanted to start turning Vipers into mecha type machines.
Let me at least give you something to go with that. The reason why I didn't want the Glenn A. Larson version, even though he is the creator of Battlestar, is that he fell in with the dude that did the movie based on what is the name of that computer game? Wing Commander. Remember Wing Commander?
Yep, I remember.
The guy that created that got a hold of Glenn A. Larson and convinced him that he was the only guy that could help Glenn A. Larson do a movie version. After watching Wing Commander and how faithful, really, that was to the original game, a lot of us were like, no, that dude should not even,
No.
you know. But that's the version, that's really what Glenn A. Larson wanted to do. He was working with that guy to do a Battlestar Galactica thing. And a lot of us were like, no.
And then Hatch himself was trying to do his Second Coming.
Yes.
Where
And that I would have rather have seen the Second Coming rather than what Glenn A. Larson wanted to do. So.
I think most of us fans did. It's like, let's go for it.
You can still find the short for that on YouTube. Battlestar Galactica: The Second Coming.
Yeah, I mean, there was a longer one done, but for copyright reasons, they only have the short one on there. But he was.
I got a chance to see the longer one.
You did?
I met Richard Hatch twice.
Okay.
And got a chance to hang out with him, and nice guy. Really nice guy.
Lucky. He's no longer. I don't think he's no longer with us.
Oh, he's
right?
gone.
No, he's gone. But I got a chance to hang out with him and ask questions, and super intense dude. Intense dude. Very intelligent. He was about as smart as you would expect him to be. I, on the other hand, though, wanted to ask him questions about stuff outside of Battlestar. I was wanting, I think the question that really threw him was, how did it feel to replace Michael Douglas on a hit TV show? And what was it like to act opposite a legend like Carl Malden? Now, for those of you younger...
Carl Malden with the big nose from On the Waterfront, and a Family Guy, I think they made fun of him. It was like, I did cocaine with Carl Malden once.
Anybody under the age of 35, you need to understand what I'm talking about. Carl Malden and Michael Douglas actually had a hit television series called The Streets of San Francisco, and it was big.
Oh,
that
huge.
show was big, and eventually Michael Douglas decided that he wasn't going to be on the show anymore. He and the producers parted ways, so they hired Richard Hatch to replace Michael Douglas.
For that last season.
Yeah, for the final season, and of which one of the episodes they did, the bad guy was played by Mark Hamill.
Really?
Yeah. Yep. There's a picture of Richard Hatch arresting Mark Hamill.
Yep. I love that picture.
That's a good picture. It's the Streets of San Francisco. Man, I feel so old.
Thank you, Keith. You do the same damn thing to me too.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
No, you gotta do it right. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so very, very sorry. And shut up, Wesley.
But Richard Hatch was a fun dude. He was a fun dude to hang out with.
I don't know what Bojay.
Yeah. Well, now
Stopper.
He had known him for years prior to them doing Battlestar Galactica. And in fact, for those of you out there that still liked watching soap operas, Richard Hatch is one of the aforementioned, though unnamed, children in the title of the show, All My Children. When the show originally came to the air, he was one of the children.
Didn't all those soap operas that still play, like your Days of Our Lives and your General Hospital, don't those all start in like the 60s, the mid 60s, I think?
Actually, soap operas take their name from when they were on radio. And the sponsors of those shows, since those shows were made for women, were soap companies. And so a lot of... Whenever you have a new technology that everyone can get into, that you can be entertained by, you got to understand that almost everything that we see on television, well, not almost everything, a significant portion of what we initially saw on television were all inspired by radio shows.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you made the transition from radio to television, that's how it came about. In fact, the oldest network out of all of them, the one that is the actual granddaddy of all networks, is, can you guess?
Mutual. Is it a Mutual?
It's a good guess. Good guess.
I'm trying to, because you had NBC Red, you had NBC Blue.
That's right. NBC is the granddaddy, and they were broken apart. I think the government got involved, the FCC really, and created NBC Red and NBC Blue. And NBC Blue became...
Oh.
You can do it. You can do it.
It can't be American Broadcasting.
No.
No, American Broadcasting was...
CBS?
That's CBS.
That's right.
CBS, yeah. Columbia Broadcasting System.
Columbia Broadcasting System really is the other NBC station or network. When they divided the whole thing, creating NBC Blue, that eventually became CBS.
Mm-hmm.
And then years later, ABC came along.
So, and yes, you're right. Roscoe P. Coltrane was in that movie. Yeah, he was. James Best.
Yep.
And
I'm trying to remember who that is. Who's Roscoe P. Coltrane?
oh my God.
Dukes of Hazzard.
Yeah. Good, boys.
You two boys. Oh,
Great actor. Great actor, James Best. It's sad that he's only known for Roscoe by a lot of people.
Yeah.
But he did a lot of different roles.
Oh,
Science
geez.
fiction.
He was in the studio system, so they tried to groom him to be like... He was a younger guy at the time, so they groomed him for a lot of the younger guy type things, usually teenage guys or guys... Yeah, I mean, it was just...
And he had kind of a William Campbell look to him.
Yeah.
William Campbell from Star Trek?
Yeah.
Trelane, oh, okay. Oh, my dear Baron Tagge. Sorry, I just had to say that.
And like Keith was saying, a lot of this stuff came from radio shows.
Yep. Shows like Dragnet
Mm-hmm.
was originally a radio show.
Right.
And then you had, let's see, the most popular television show, Gunsmoke, was a radio show.
Mm-hmm.
And
Oh, that I did not know.
Yeah, William Conrad was Marshall Dillon, the big fat guy.
So did the television version continue the story that the radio version, or did they simply reboot it?
They just readapted it.
Yeah.
You know,
Okay.
I mean, again, for years people had seen this only in their minds.
Right.
And so you're making a live action version. The Lone Ranger radio show, Superman radio,
Right.
Batman radio, Dick
Superman
Tracy had,
radio.
yeah. Well, a majority of what we now know of Superman for, a lot of what became a part of the character was invented for the radio show. Like Kryptonite. Kryptonite was invented for the radio show. It wasn't a part of the comics.
Right. And even with the comedy, I noticed that pop culture mechanic, Jack Benny, Bob Hope, Red Skelton, even the comedy. That's why when you had Ernie Kovacs coming along in the 50s,
Oh,
he
yeah.
was the first one that broke the mold where people were basically taking their radio shows and vaudeville acts and putting them on television. Ernie saw the importance of how we can use this medium for television.
That's right. Ernie Kovacs was the original, to put it for a lot of you younger people, think of people that do stupid stuff or do jokes and stuff on YouTube. Film funny little side gags and everything. That's what Ernie Kovacs was doing in the 1950s.
He had one of the most expensive gags. And what it was a car commercial. He put a car on the stage, and they had the stage just barely sawed through. And all it was him walking out there, slapping his hand on the hood, and that caused it to fall through the stage. And just the cost of that one quick, 5 seconds, but the laugh. I mean, that was the type.
Where Lucille Ball is the queen of comedy for television, Ernie Kovacs was the king.
Right. And oddly enough, in England, on the BBC, their Ernie Kovacs was Benny Hill.
Yep.
He was doing virtually the same thing on the BBC at about the same time as Kovacs.
Mm-hmm. Benny Hill in that song, Yakety Sax.
Yeah. I thought you were going to talk about Ernie, the fastest milk delivery guy in the West. Ernie. And yeah, you're absolutely right. Ernie Kovacs died in a car accident, and they said when they found him in the car, it was the only time that he had an unlit cigar. He was always Dutch Master. He was always promoting Dutch Master cigars, and he was constantly smoking those Dutch Masters.
Didn't they make like a biopic of Ernie Kovacs? I remember seeing it on TV when I was a kid.
Yeah.
A made-for-television movie about his life. Yeah.
Yeah.
Was it like Jeff Goldblum or someone that played him? I forget who played him.
I'd have to look it up, but I mean, he still doesn't get the recognition that he should. Especially being an early television pioneer.
I could tell you, nobody my age. I'm in my late 30s. Nobody my age probably even knows who Ernie Kovacs is.
Well, what you need to do is watch North to Alaska, and John Wayne knocks him down the water slide there that they had there in the silver mines.
Yeah,
because he was in the movie North to Alaska.
North
that's just it.
Alaska.
North to Alaska, based off the song. Yeah. John.
Also, you have certain programs that make their way from radio to television, and then certain programs that become huge as far as influence for the business, really for television. You have a show like, say, Your Show of Shows.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? That is probably the most influential show in the history of television. Why, you may ask? Because you can, from that one television show, early comedy show, you can trace pretty much all the way up to modern day TV. Different TV shows that were inspired and blah, 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 on and on and on. Basically, Your Show of Shows was the original version of Saturday Night Live.
So you like your sketch comedies?
Sketch comedies.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And music acts.
Yeah, but it's really who works on the show.
Mm-hmm.
All of their writers and stuff would go on to be some of the biggest names in entertainment.
Oh.
And then you went from that show, you could trace it to other television shows that came after. It's kind of like what happened with Saturday Night Live. When Saturday Night Live started getting rid of a lot of their talent in the mid 80s, a lot of the people that used to work on the original Saturday Night Live in the 70s went off to do other things and created other shows, like Fridays. Fridays was a sketch comedy show on Friday nights.
Yep.
And
I remember watching it when it first came out.
That's right. And many of the comedians and stuff were people that were brand new to the business. If you've been watching Saturday Night Live for years, you didn't know any of these people.
Mm-mm.
But years later,
you knew about them after. Yeah.
Yes. Like Larry David got his big break on Fridays. And
Kramer.
Yeah.
Michael Richards, yeah.
Playing Little Mister. Mm-hmm. That was so much fun. Little Mister.
But I mean, you take a look at your shows. It said Caesar, and of course you had Imogene Coca. Anyone who watched the National Lampoon movie, remember the old surly aunt they picked up? That's her.
Yeah,
that was her. Carl Reiner was involved with that show. I mean, you're talking about giants.
Carl Reiner, Mel Brooks, and wait a minute. Don't tell me.
Oh, okay.
Carl Reiner, Mel Brooks, and Woody Allen were just some of the writers on that show.
Mm-hmm. And that's where Carl Reiner and Mel Brooks, I think, came up with the
5,000-Year-Old Man.
Yeah, that's where that one came from. Was off that show.
And then Mel Brooks, of course, started making movies, and eventually created one more TV show. Actually, a few TV shows, because he created, let's see, the '60s series. He created Get Smart. He co-created Get Smart.
Yeah, with Buck Henry.
And then in the '70s, he did a television series spoof on Robin Hood called When Things Were Rotten. And I personally think that many of the jokes and stuff that he came up with for Robin Hood Men in Tights, he got from when he was doing When Things Were Rotten back in the '70s.
And who was Robin Hood? Jaime.
Yep. God, we're old.
I know we're old.
Oh my God, we're just dropping knowledge left, right, and center.
Yeah, and I don't even know half this stuff, so I'm just listening.
Well, I mean, that brings us to an upcoming program, if I may, just for a moment. That brings us to an upcoming show we're going to do on Pop Culture Minefield, because we're going to be
plug.
We're going to be celebrating the life of Jerry Anderson.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're going to be talking about his company and all the famous things that he was doing, starting with things like Supercar.
Mm-hmm.
Supercar. Captain Scarlet.
And the Mistrons. Thunderbirds are go!
Go, yes.
Joe 90.
Oh. And all that stuff that he was doing, and then he decided, hey, I've had enough with the puppets. Let me use people the same way. and
oddly enough, if you want to take a look at the show, the proto before Space 99, the UFO, you can see some of that cerebral stuff that you'd find with the Forbidden Planet, because a lot serious, a lot darker, a lot more cerebral.
Yep. So then you have shows like UFO, which, again, is still a stunning show. I think they just came out with a remastered version of that. So they cleaned it all up, and it looks like it was shot yesterday. Mm-hmm. And so
this looks pretty relevant right here.
Oh my God! Let me tell you, man. When I was little, it's like, I was too young to really know what to do with women, but I knew I liked what I saw.
Oh yeah.
So this is another British series.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, I'll be honest. It's funny how there's way more British science fiction series than American. American, you think of Star Trek, and you think of back then, and then a decade later, Battlestar Galactica.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the one thing we're talking about, I mean, where we had something like Forbidden Planet that actually kicked the door open for mature, hard science fiction. Britain was doing. I mean, all the way back even to the 40s. I mean, you had them actually doing RUR, Rostam's Universal Robots, where we got the phrase robot from. You had them doing 1984. You had of course, the Quartermass series. These were very serious, hardcore, deep science fiction. A for Andromeda.
Quartermass really is the show that was the inspiration for J.J. Abrams's produced series Fringe.
Mm-hmm.
Because really, Fringe is nothing more than an American version of Quartermass.
Are you trying to say that J.J. Abrams stole?
What? No! I'm not saying that at all.
I don't know. It's a homage. It's a homage.
It's an homage. Yeah, that's all it is.
With the emphasis on the age, the homage. There you go.
Qui écoute la fromage. But look.
I was going to say that, but the sad thing is so many of these things are lost because of the purges. So we don't see what they were doing. While we're doing, obviously we had gems like Twilight Zone and Outer Limits, but doing all the more kiddish style science fiction here. Even Doctor Who, you take a look and see some of the original Doctor Who's back in those days, even though it was a kids show.
Yeah,
it was pretty deep, pretty deep show.
Yeah, very deep show. I mean, the show was so popular, it was hard for other networks in Britain to compete against it, so you had to try to program to that same audience. So that led IGTV to create the Tomorrow People, which, in my opinion, was sort of like a British version of the X-Men.
Yeah.
And the Tomorrow People was rebooted so many times.
No.
Now stay on this. No, whoa! Don't change the screen yet.
Yeah.
This is the most recent version
Yep.
of the Tomorrow People created for the CW network, but it's based on that same idea. Now, wait. If you look and go down to the third row and go all the way to the right, there, that picture. That's from the original series.
Yep.
So
Wow,
how
yeah,
you went from this to what the CW series is.
Yeah.
and in between, there was a Nickelodeon series done for
I was
kids.
gonna bring that one up.
Yeah, that was also the Tomorrow People.
And you had them do tripods.
Yeah.
But they only were able to do like 2/3 of the story before they lost budgeting and couldn't keep the tripod for long.
Basically, the Tomorrow People is some people are born with advanced abilities, the next level of human evolution.
Right.
And they have these devices, these boxes that allowed them to teleport, or as they called it back then, jaunting.
Yeah.
And again, I remember watching it going, this is so much like X-Men, just minus a lot of the cool costumes, but, you know.
Well, of course, Kolchak. You know, you got to throw Kolchak.
Kolchak, the Night Stalker, and of course, there's so much. I mean, when you look at, my mind is just sort of freezing up on certain things.
I know.
I'm looking at the Tomorrow People going,
yeah,
it's been so long.
I mean, we're doing a James Burke job here of connections off of this film and how what came up before that, what exploded, and what, you know, and really, honestly, I think we can honestly say if it wasn't Forbidden Planet, the evolution of science fiction, American science fiction, probably would have stalled a little bit more. You wouldn't have had Star Trek. You wouldn't have probably started seeing stuff coming into the 70s, maybe. And who knows? We might not even have Star Wars because you just never know. This film was it. I mean, this should be on the top of anybody's top 10 list of all-time great science fiction films.
I agree. I mean, this was just the imaginations of all the baby boomers and younger and stuff, Gen Xers. It just really opened up the imaginations, and hence a lot of the visuals we've been talking about have been reused in pretty unique ways in other franchises. So this is, to me, I say this is the granddaddy of most science fiction for the most part.
Coming out of Hollywood, yes.
Yeah, out of Hollywood.
American Hollywood. Yeah, and the thing is, it also broke type because it didn't have that Cold War feeling over it. This is Freudian stuff, or Freudian, if you want to go with it. This was the psyche. This was the id. This was the monsters inside of us. Well,
which was later used in Star Trek, especially with the Enemy Within episode, where Kirk gets split into two. The transporter accident splits him into two parts. One, one more like your id, and one like your. I forget what comes out of the goodness of you. Is it your ego, super ego? I forget which one it is.
Yeah. Well, you have your ego, your super ego, your id. And even going back to mythology, where you have Hugin and Munin with the Viking myth, Hugin and Munin is thought and memory, and you have to have the one, because if you don't have the one with the other, you have destruction, you have chaos. If you have thought without memory, it's destructive. And so you kind of take a look at some of the Freudian stuff all the way 1,000+ years ago out of the Nordic culture in that aspect. You're having it here. You have the people, the Krill. There were peaceful people. They've gotten violence out, but not fully, because when they used the machine, it was that little bit of the destructiveness inside of them that destroyed them all out. and they had
It's
nothing to be able to stop them.
it's like a Twilight Zone story played out as a longer movie.
Hmm.
And when you see a lot of the really best of science fiction, is kind of like that. That's what's so great about what Rod Serling did
Hmm.
with that show. And again, you you have to understand that something like Planet of the Apes, which
Hmm.
I consider, look, it was good until I actually learned what Planet of the Apes actually was, and that
Hmm.
the book that it was based on, and the fact that the
I
movie.
actually read that book.
So
Totally
you
different.
now understand what I'm about to say.
Yeah.
There is a great I mean, just a galaxy's worth of distance between the actual book
Hmm.
and the movies and all the other attempts to
Well,
remake and had they used something like this, the budget for this
mhm.
movie, had they used
Well,
even a lot of these sets and everything else, they probably could have done a really decent Planet of the Apes movie.
now
You
look
know,
at the Ed monster you have on there. Notice what's on the chin. He's got the goatee like Walter Pigeon. Right
hmm
there, that's showing you if you're catching and watching it, you are seeing that that's the destructive nature of Morbius coming out
Yep.
on that.
Now, is that supposed to be designed like a gorilla or a lion or something? Because I know they used for the original sound effects, they used the roar of a lion before they put in the final, sound of the id monster. But I'm curious what
Well,
this is.
it's meant to be something really scary because
Right.
remember, you know, for the studios to make something like this, you gotta guarantee getting butts and seats. And so you're
Mm-hmm.
gonna put people to sit. You're gonna have people sit down to watch this very cerebral story.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's time to kick up the action factor. For those people who have
Mm-hmm.
not been impressed with the story, you got to give them something visual. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
you got to pay the piper.
Absolutely.
So, this is whatever they wanted it to be a
Right.
creature of unimaginable terror. And again, two ways to see this movie: either in a theater or, as was so popular back then, the drive-in
Right.
theater.
I mean, as it goes, think of the monster underneath your bed. This is it.
Yeah.
I mean, this isn't based off anything other than the fact that this is your nightmare coming alive.
Yep.
This is your nightmare coming at you. Actually, in many cases, this is somebody else's nightmare coming at you, which makes it even worse.
So
Yeah.
just think of what they could do with this, with our current level of technology, what they could get away with if they decided to just do another version of this.
Well, so Jesse wanted to. Actually, he wanted to do a not quite a prequel, but he wanted to continue on, do something in the story that's in this universe, but it fell through.
Yeah.
So,
Who did?
but Straczynski, JMS, Babylon
Oh.
5.
Also, he was working on a potential remake of Forbidden
Not a
Planet.
remake, not a remaster. He was like kind of like a prequel-ish. It was kind of ambiguous how it was, but it wasn't going to be a reboot. Thank goodness. His big thing though was he was going to not keep the aesthetics of the sets and the props and all that, because he said that this was at that time this is what we we're thinking of the future. So he wanted to update everything to 1999, which was about the time he was talking about it, I think. In some ways, I'm glad he didn't do it, because there's just that aesthetic to this film that's just absolutely beautiful.
I have a
No,
question. I have a
yeah.
question. I'm wondering if they would have, because you know how like a lot of '50s movies were readapted in the '80s, and they were usually done better and stuff. Do you think an '80s adaptation of this would have been a step up, or do you think no?
It would have been a step to the side. Because
Side?
the visual effects technology in order to go above this would have cost way too much money. I know of what you're speaking about with remaking into the 80s, but here's the additional thing about doing that. In the 80s, a lot of studios didn't want to spend a lot of money doing it, so they tried to do it on the cheap. for the most part. They not cheap, but they tried to not make it too expensive.
Right.
Okay,
Within budget.
so
Okay.
within budget. So
Yeah.
for in the '80s, this would have been maybe a $25 million thing.
Right.
So,
And and a sidestep at best. Remember, Star Trek: The Motion Picture took a lot of wind out of the sails because it didn't. They dumped all this money. The film wasn't technically finished when they put it out.
That's the big thing about the motion picture. It wasn't finished.
It wasn't finished.
The thing about the new 4K director's edition is that the movie has actually been completed because they were able to find all of the elements that even I think even Paramount didn't originally give them when they did the original director's cut 20 years ago almost.
Oh yeah, God! Now you make me feel old.
I mean, there were even, for instance, I did not know this, but they didn't even really have the ADR for a lot of the movie, which means that the sound quality of what you were getting, a lot of the dialogue from a lot of the actors in the film was recorded that day on set. It was not something that was meant to remain in the movie.
Right.
You know, you ADR is basically you go into a booth and you lip sync what you've already said to what you were saying on the screen. And so you're recording a better version of lines. Sometimes people will even change lines. Okay? Right. So Star Trek: The Motion Picture, this new version that they've made is taking an opportunity to give us better lines, clearer lines, certain lines that are mumbled, fixing visual effects, or in this case, actually adding visual effects, cleaning
like the
up,
outside of V'ger, like the outside of V'ger's ship for starters, especially when
or
they get
the
to
outside
Earth.
of the Enterprise for when Kirk goes out the first time. People keep talking about the scene where Kirk goes out to get Spock. There's actually two versions of that. Okay, he actually does it twice. The first time was to go after Spock.
Yeah,
They found out that Spock was outside the Enterprise, so Kirk had to suit up. And the original version of the scene is you see the scene where Spock is sitting out there, and he's doing the countdown before he zooms off into V'ger. Okay? Kirk is just come from the ship, and he's trying to reach out to Spock, and Spock leaves.
Oh, that's right.
He's not wearing the right costume and gear to go after him, so he has to go back to the ship to re-gear up in the same kind of gear that Spock was wearing, so because he's going to go after him. And as he didn't
have that little jetpack.
Right. But also his spacesuit was slightly different.
A lot different.
It was a lot different. He needed to wear what Spock was wearing, so they had to bring him back aboard, have him get out of all that gear, put on the same gear that Spock had along with the jetpack, and get back out there just in time to see Spock's body float back.
And originally, though, Kirk was going to go along with him in there. They did film scenes of that, and they were attacked by crystalline life forms in there and all that, but they decided to discard all that for what we saw in the motion picture.
And then certain scenes, they didn't have time to clean up a lot of the scenes from... usually visual effects back then, you had to layer a lot of your visuals one on top of the other. And sometimes certain things that it'll do is it'll muddy a lot of what you see or darken a lot of what you want to see. So they fixed all of that so that everything's uniform. And then for the space dock sequence with the Enterprise, they didn't put the Earth in back of it for a lot of those scenes because that got dropped because they didn't have enough time. So
plus, you could also see the armature that was connected to the Enterprise.
So there's a lot of things about that movie that were completely unfinished.
Right.
Sound, visual effects. Just.
I mean, even at some point, even from the beginning, when you see the opening titles, those are just placeholders, and they added for that.
So they give them real opening titles for this movie now. And what I didn't know is Jerry Goldsmith had only recorded that music 10 days before the movie was to premiere.
Yep.
I did not know that.
Interesting.
And so, the studios are all afraid. That's why Star Trek 2 was on such a tight budget. A lot of the other ones. And when you did have these big, huge blockbuster films with these big budgets, they're going for the stars like Arnold and Sylvester and all those guys. So obviously they weren't going to put a lot of stuff in the other areas because, well, half of our budget's for the main guy.
Huh.
Also, the up until what I never knew for the longest time is that V'ger actually was in the movie originally, but it was on the monitor. That if you knew where to look, you could actually see what V'ger actually looked like in the original movie. And then they also had to do color corrections. So certain scenes in the released version of the movie weren't color corrected. And this was the very definition of a movie that was not ready to be seen by the general audience. They didn't even have a test screening at all.
So they were really running behind with all the...
Yeah.
Well, the footage was wet when it got delivered. Mm-hmm. The reels were wet.
Wow.
Yeah. There was this boom, boom, boom. It was because we have to get it out.
Because you have a studio that was wanting to make a big splash. So they decided, and again, studios to this day still do this, where they will greenlight a movie, and then they will tell you, hey, your movie has to be done by X date because we've already chosen the premiere date. Mm-hmm. When the movie has to be seen for the big Hollywood premiere or the big premiere someplace else. And both this movie, Star Trek, and the one big movie the year before, Superman the movie, both of them had premieres in Washington, D.C., with the President of the United States in attendance.
Yeah, this was another difference right here in the director's cut with the path when they go to V'ger and stuff. That's one thing I noticed after rewatching the director's cut not too long ago. So,
and they also wanted to get this out fast for another big reason. This was released on December 7th, 1979. What will be coming out 5 months later, or 6 months later?
Empire.
Right. They wanted to beat Empire. They didn't want to compete with Empire. They wanted to have...
No, they would have been destroyed if they would have competed with Empire.
Right.
It's a different kind of movie. And so...
this is the second... I looked this up. This is the second highest budgeted movie in the 70s after Superman. Like, this is higher budget. This has a higher budget than even Star Wars. And
yeah, it also made a lot of money.
Yeah.
This movie... Yeah. The biggest fallacy is that this movie lost money. That's not true. It actually...
No, they just didn't want to... Yeah, they just didn't. The studios after this just didn't want to put the They didn't want to risk the same budget. So with Wrath of Khan, I think it was like 25% of the budget. So I think it was like down to $10 million again.
Yeah, it made money. It just didn't make what the studios wanted. They were expecting more.
Yeah, what were they expecting? $1 billion back in 1979? Jeez,
well, they wanted to beat Star Wars. They wanted to be above Star Wars. They figured they had if they could come out there. They have Dykstra. They have all this. They have Roddenberry. This should, in a cinch, because we have name brand, kick Star Wars ass.
Now I have a question. Would you consider Star Trek in the 70s with the reruns and everything? Would you consider it mainstream, or would you consider it niche back then?
Oh wow! You know what? Star Trek, for all of what it has and had going for it, it was still niche because Star Trek was a show that didn't take the easy way out, like Lost in Space, and Battlestar Galactica. Those shows are easier because everything's reduced to battle, shoot, pew, pew.
Oh, like
Whereas with Star Trek, not every episode is about that.
No.
And so you have to try to figure out another way to get to your ending. Now, that isn't to say that they didn't have episodes where, Kirk wasn't knocking somebody's block off. But that wasn't always what it was about. The stories were more complex. And I think mainly because Roddenberry really brought into the idea of having Star Trek be science fiction. If for any other thing, if you really want to experience science fiction, Star Trek is a good first step. It is your beginning step into the much wider universe of literary science fiction.
Right. So I slightly disagree with Keith on this one. I think it has that niche, but it's in the gray area. Because you had a lot of people, what we call normies or average people, that were watching it, but they would never go out there and call themselves a Star Trek fan. They would never go out there and think of themselves as a science fiction fan, but they watched it, and they would keep on watching it. Mm-hmm. And if there was that one piece of science fiction that they did watch, it was Star Trek. It had to have more than that niche to be able to be what it became here. With of course, the movies, the '80s. You did have the average person having it affect them. But again, they wouldn't consider themselves a Trekkie. They wouldn't consider themselves into science fiction. It was like, oh, this is a fun show to watch and all that. Ha ha. It's going. What's going to be on after this one? Oh, it's Green Acres. Okay, it was that type of thing, and that's what kept it alive on there. That you did have, of course, the hardcore base. I mean, no doubt about the niche. But it had to reach over enough and go into a little bit of that Shadowlands where it was grabbing the average person into it. And just like Keith was saying, this is good for visual media, literary science fiction to introduce people. As much as I sit back and say, when it comes around to novelizations, books of science fiction, Isaac Asimov's I, Robot, I think is the perfect primer to introduce somebody to science fiction in book form.
Yeah. Oh, look, the thing about this movie that I really loved was that there was an attempt with this film to try to really and truly connect it up to the series and to try to give these characters a kind of a believable life and existence beyond everything that we had seen. And a good example of that is what you learn in the novelization written by Gene Roddenberry. Where Roddenberry made he was given $400,000 to do that. Sorry, $40,000 to do that. There's the story of Bones. Now, in the movie, it's implied that Bones is either at a commune or someplace on Earth. According to Gene Roddenberry, Bones was actually on Yonada.
Oh, Yonada from For the World Is How I've Touched the Sky.
That's right.
The asteroid ship.
He was with his girlfriend. He was studying. He basically kept his promise and went back there because he was retired. I mean,
Yeah.
And Admiral Nagora drafted him back. So he's mad.
In other words, Jim, they drafted me.
He's really mad. He should be mad,
Yeah. This was your idea. Bones, there's a thing out there. Why is everything we don't understand called a thing?
I think the one thing about that was the biggest thing that was the thorn in the side that hampered Star Trek: The Motion Picture. It was copying the Changeling and a few others of the original series. And we didn't want to see a redux, a redo, a reboot, whatever. We wanted to see a new adventure, and here we are. Well, it's Nomad, but he's huge. And it's like you're sitting through the film saying it's slow, and I've seen this before.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like you said, the probe, it's a probe, an Earth-made probe, goes out into the universe, collides with an alien probe, scrambles its programming to believe that everything that's not, a machine or that's not perfect will be sterilized. That was Nomad in the Changeling now, and it's almost the same thing in this. Only difference is in this, it's looking for its creator. Hence, Spock gets, it communicates with Spock somehow, and That's why Spock gets involved. And I think Spock's little story and when he asks the question, is there nothing more than this? And you see him cry. It's so impactful. Like it's one of my favorite shots. It's one of my favorite shots of the movie. Just Nimoy lying down and crying.
Yeah,
And then
and ultimately, you have to look at what Spock was attempting to do, within the story. Everyone else had gone on to what they ultimately wanted to do, for the most part. I mean, Kirk eventually realized that getting kicked upstairs was not the best thing for him. Spock wanted to be
Kolinar.
Vulcan.
Yeah.
He wanted to go the full way. He wanted to be the ultimate Vulcan, really.
Yeah,
And,
purge of all emotions, I believe, is what the Kolinar process is.
Right.
And he found out that his thoughts, he was connecting to what V'ger was broadcasting. And
Now,
yeah, go ahead.
And now bring that back to Forbidden Planet. You're seeing that with Morbius. Where,
Excuse me, I forgot we're supposed to be talking about Forbidden Planet. There we go.
So, I mean, where you have, of course, with Morbius, with his, and of course the inner inside. Now, obviously, his is the more destructive end of it, while Spock's is more what's out there. We got to find meaning to it. Again, you're getting to that cerebralness. With those characters, you can see that influence from Forbidden Planet even into the motion picture.
Oh yeah.
When Roddenberry made the first pilot, The Cage, and you have the Enterprise crew beamed down, wearing their landing jackets. That's one of the things that I really admired about Star Trek The Motion Picture, because they brought that back.
Oh, yeah.
The jackets that they ended up wearing in Star Trek The Motion Picture...
When they're on V'ger.
Yes, are based on those jackets. It's the modern-day update of a landing uniform jacket. And they ended up doing the same thing on Enterprise. Having, for a while, they would have landing jackets. That's mainly in the first season. But the idea of a special jacket or coat to wear that would allow you to have all this stuff that you might need on a mission is a really cool idea, I thought, and something that was brought back around again for Star Trek The Motion Picture. And what I'm getting to is that, a lot of that well thought out type of stuff that you had for characters is a lot of what you saw in Forbidden Planet.
Yes.
Everything that you have in this movie had to be thought out in a way that would allow the average film goer to connect to it, to understand it.
So you have the everyman, which is the cook right here, and he's basically say, "Hey, we're running out of bourbon. We're running out of bourbon. Can you make us some?" And here we have the first initial idea of the replicator is Robbie the robot. He just basically, you give him the chemical formula and he can replicate, in this movie, 60 gallons. And as you see, 60 gallons are 400 something pints of alcohol. So, and here he is drinking, and this is like the moment of levity in the movie. This is right before the initial attack between the id creature. The id creature murders the chief.
Yep.
So,
it again, great movie, and I think I'm a little biased, but I am a big science fiction fan.
I had no idea.
I know,
I had
right?
no idea.
Right?
I just thought since you were on Fat Stevens Babylon 5 stuff, I feel like you'd be perfect for Forbidden Planet because of the connection between Babylon 5 and this.
I would love to be in that Babylon 5 talk.
If Babylon 5 is... Look, I will say this. I am beyond excited for what J. Michael Straczynski is wanting to do. Normally I would not be that excited for any type of a reimagining or revisit or whatever. But as long as it's the person who created it, I'm down. I'm down to clown on that one because I think that's one of the sad realities now currently within the entertainment industry, is that we find ourselves as corporations begin to buy up all of these really cool IPs and ideas. There seems to be this desperate need to separate the creators from their creation,
Right.
to downplay their influence, or
Yeah,
to make
that's
light
crap.
or push them away from things. And again,
Right.
I get it. George Lucas, prior to Disney buying everything, George Lucas was not someone that was at the top of a lot of people's lists. There were certain Star Wars fans that didn't like a lot of his ideas. And let me just
Prequels.
tell you, officially, unofficially, whatever, don't you kind of miss him now? Given everything that's
yes.
happened with Disney,
Oh,
don't
yes.
you just kind of, because Star Trek
the-
fans would love Roddenberry to still be alive. Okay, Battlestar Galactica fans would love their creator to be alive. Everybody would. Everybody.
Yeah.
Every franchise you enjoy, you would love to hear from that creator, whether it's Doctor Who or whatever. The thing is, they're not. But for Star Wars fans, you got to realize Lucas is still alive. Okay? And again, check out that picture of his car and the tree.
He shouldn't be.
He shouldn't be, but he is. You know, I think that it would be smart on Disney's part to allow him to do something. Because
Yeah.
to completely just cut him off and to never again create anything because KK and her friends don't want him to, that's a sad statement. That is just a sad statement. Yeah, there it is.
Holy crap! Oh my!
Yeah.
God. He survived this.
Yes.
Yes.
Holy crap!
Yeah, yeah. You can see what the car looked like before and what the car looked like after.
Holy crap! Wow!
And
And there he is. And there he is. And there he is.
Yeah, he loves fast cars. And Robbie wasn't a scaled down version of the Krill machine. He was Dr. Morbius used the machine that helped heighten his IQ, where he sat back and still said he was a moron compared to the Krill, to be able to get inspired to build Robbie the robot. So, in a direct sense, that he was Krill technology was used to help create him, but he wasn't a scaled down version of the machine.
Yeah, like the only thing that the robot can do is obviously replicate stuff, and basically disarm and basically it follows all that stuff that they talk about with him. You know, not being able to harm a human. That's basically Asimov's laws, right? Asimov's laws were around back when this came out, right? iRobot and all that.
Yeah,
I think
iRobot
yeah.
was out. Yeah, iRobot was like early 50s.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I mean, a series of short stories. A lot of
Yeah.
what Asimov did were really just short stories that were printed in various magazines. Amazing stories, amazing fantasy, stuff like that. Which is again something that I wish we still had a lot of those magazines, because you could read so much amazing stuff, and we don't have those anymore. At least not that I've seen.
At least not in the sense we have now. I mean, and in what quality you're getting for the writers nowadays. And iRobot as a book was originally published in 50. The short stories were throughout the 40s.
Okay. Interesting. So it looks like we're almost on 3 hours. So
No, really? Wow.
yeah.
Uh-oh.
So all right.
so
So
sorry.
so what happens in this movie is basically we find out Morbius is the beast that's killing people in this movie is basically Morbius's id. And his id basically comes alive. I thought his id only came alive when he sleeps, but apparently it comes when he's awake too. Like as we see when we're back in the estate, and they basically bar the entire estate, right here.
Mhm.
And I'm just curious, it's just like, I guess when you feel like deeply rooted, like you have that deep resentment and stuff. That I guess that's how it manifests. That's how the creature kind of manifests, that deep hatred and stuff, and it just comes up, just comes to life by itself. But yeah, basically it gets to the point where he won't admit it. He won't admit it until it gets to the point where they're all going to die, and then he actually admits. He actually admits that it's him. He's guilty.
Mhm.
And he basically goes and confronts it, and he basically dies. He dies in the process. So this kind of makes me think of. What's funny is this kind of makes me think of Star Wars when they try to, in the prequels, when they use the lightsabers to try to open these doors and stuff to get to the Nemoidians in Episode 1.
Oh yeah,
That's what it kind of makes me think of.
Yeah.
It's too bad it would have been interesting to see Vader try to do something like this in the original Star Wars, but I guess they didn't. They didn't have the time or the money because that movie was, he was getting sick from all the work and stuff. But yeah, so Morbius he confronts the Beast, and the Beast basically hurts him, and he basically dies from the injuries, hence killing the Beast as well. So. And he basically tells Adams right here basically to turn the dial here, I think, and then throw the switch here, which basically sets the self-destruct. I don't know if the whole planet did the whole planet destroy itself? Yeah, the whole planet destroys itself. Okay, and then they just leave and stuff. It would have been interesting if there would have been a little bit higher stakes, where they had to race against time. There would be a portion of the movie where they had to race against time to get off the planet in time before it explodes. Kind of like Alien and stuff. But that's just a nitpick. I mean, obviously the point was made for this movie with the id and Dr. Morbius and stuff. But yeah, this was a brilliant ending. This was very cerebral. I mean, he's not a bad guy. He's just simply an antagonist that doesn't know he's an antagonist, and that's what makes this brilliant. That's what makes this movie brilliant. Is that there's no good guys and bad guys. It's just people.
Well, he's much a victim.
That's
exactly.
really what Star Trek was originally able to do, even for its show. There were no bad guys. What you had were people that believed something different than the main characters. But it wasn't no mustache twirling villains. There were no villains. I shouldn't say bad guys. There were no villains. Okay? It was about having a difference of opinion and finding different ways of working it out. Okay? Now, current corporate Trek, there are bad guys. There are villains. There's evil, for what it's worth, there seemed to be some sort of an entertainment value. If I didn't have standards, I might even watch it. But I'm
glad you have taste. I'm glad you have standards.
I plus I don't hate myself enough. So.
Then the time could be used. I mean, it's your time. You don't get the time back. You might as well use it towards stuff that's worth your time.
I mean, you really take a look at that. I mean, this is how odd this is for this era also, that, there isn't really truly the bad guy other than the fact it was the passion inside. I mean, Morbius was a very passionate person. You could tell that with everything he was doing. And how much, that's a good shot. I'm like, we'll go back to that one. I like that one.
Yeah, I can see something.
Yeah.
Annie Francis. Lovely
was
lady. Anne Francis. Lovely, lovely lady.
I thought she was younger. I thought she was younger than she actually was. She was like in her late 20s when she did this. I thought she was only like 21 or something. So
well, now the thing about Hollywood and working with talent is that what you'll notice is that having young people lead a movie is really more a creation of Hollywood post all of this, post the studio system. Because with the studio system, they treated it like a skill that you would learn. You had these actors coming in, learning how to be better actors, learning how to be a part of the system. But your stars are mainly people starting in their very, very late 20s, early 30s. Mm-hmm. Okay? Once we start getting into the 1970s, that's when you start seeing the rise of actors and actresses and main characters that are under the age of 27. Okay? So prior to that, you shouldn't expect to see too much. And there's a reason for that, which is just you haven't lived long enough. Anybody that, you haven't seen enough of life to bring any sort of experience to it. And that isn't to say that you can't learn something by telling a story with a young person. It's just that, given all things, being fair, being equal, it's probably easier to have stories where, your characters or your main characters are just, they've got some season to them. It's like Captain Kirk. You got to realize William Shatner and Leonard Nimoy were 30.
They were mid-30s, I believe. 35, 36 when season one.
36 years old because their birthdays were in March.
1931,
so 36 years old by the time the series hit the air in September of 1966. So that's how old Kirk is. That's how old Spock technically is when the series began. And so by the time the show goes off the air, Spock and Kirk aren't even 40 yet.
No, that's true.
And so at the time, given the time period for Star Trek the Motion Picture, they say it's only been 2 years.
Yeah.
So, and these characters are just now hitting 40. And even though they're a little older than that. But
yeah. And believe it or not, Wrath of Khan is actually, according to what Mike Okuda did in the Star Trek Encyclopedia, 14 years after the motion picture, 2285.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, and again, the thing about Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, is that you still have people that probably have never sat down to see the series. So they've never really seen the episode that movie's based on. I was eating dinner at a restaurant about 2 years ago, and there's a guy, he's one of the head guys for this restaurant, big fan of Star Trek, loved Wrath of Khan, didn't realize that there's an actual episode that this movie's based on. He had never seen the episode.
Yeah, it was Harv Bennett. Harv Bennett watched all the episodes, and he's like, "Okay, I want this guy. He was the one that nearly defeated the crew. We want him to come back." So they brought, Khan Noonien and Singh back.
You know what? I give Harv Bennett only so much credit. Harv Bennett was the guy who actually believed that, in his mind, outside of Gene Roddenberry, he was the one that actually deserved to inherit Star Trek. He believed that he was the only natural person to take over everything, and didn't believe that anyone else should have it. That he was the one that came up with the original idea of how to keep Star Trek going by casting younger people playing.
And that was what they originally were going to do with Star Trek 6.
Yep.
Yeah, unfortunately. Harv Bennett was also the one who helped to create a lot of the confusion and in my opinion, set up Star Trek V to fail.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I have to read up on all the chaos that went on during Star Trek V.
Oh,
well, of course, everything came to light. Maybe it's because Shatner told Will Wheaton that he would never let a kid pilot his ship. maybe that's where it all started. No, I'm kidding. That's probably the one positive thing about that experience.
I will say this about Star Trek V. I will say this about Star Trek V. You know how earlier I was saying that novelization for Star Trek the Motion Picture had certain things that weren't in the movie. Mm-hmm. For all of you who are Star Trek fans who dislike Star Trek V, mm-hmm. I beg you to find a copy of the novelization mm-hmm. for Star Trek V, because it will entertain you and it will piss you off at the same time. It'll be very entertaining.
Is it better than the movie?
It is a fantastic story.
Okay,
It'll
I
piss
have
you
to read
off.
it then. I have to read this then.
It'll piss you off because
Missed
that
opportunity.
novel is actually based on an earlier draft of the script that Harv Bennett talked William Shatner out of not doing.
Yep.
Really?
And
Is God still a thing though? Is God still a primary theme in the movie?
yeah, but it isn't done the same way that it is in the actual theatrical film.
Right.
So
You know,
so there's no "What does God need with a starship" quote.
nah. It's a bunch of look.
I'm asking a question.
It the movie was, oh man, the movie missed out on so much. Number one being that Harv Bennett screwed up casting the person who Shatner was led to believe was available. He was available, but Harv Bennett didn't seal the deal to get Sean Connery to play Cyborg.
Shakari.
And then, because had Sean Connery been cast, the budget for the film would never have been cut. I'll tell you that much right now.
Yeah.
That film would have been made for about as much money as they could have gotten their hands on.
Now the reason why he didn't take this was because he took Last Crusade instead.
That's right. Working with
Okay.
Steven Spielberg and Harrison Ford, and it's like they got to him first. Is really what it came down. They found out he was available. Shatner wanted to do it, and he wanted Harv Bennett to go after him, and for whatever reason dragged his feet. I don't know what it was, but by the time he actually made it to Sean's agent, and he was already gone. He was already working with Spielberg. And so any hope they had of actually increasing the budget so they can make the movie, I mean, I think outside of Star Trek the Motion Picture, Star Trek V is the one film, no, and I don't even think they did that for the motion picture. Star Trek V ran out of money
Yep.
when they were making the movie. So they stopped. They didn't even film everything that they had originally were wanting to film.
So they just stopped everything, put it together,
And had to re-edit and do a
Yep.
few things, and
throw it in
Well,
the theater.
Yeah, a couple
put-
makeup shots here and there, and there you go.
Especially that beautiful shot of the Enterprise avoiding a torpedo.
well, and again, they didn't have
That great shot. You know.
you know you're in trouble when all of the movies up to that one film you're using industrial light and magic. Because you don't have enough money, you can't use industrial light and magic. So what do you use? You use a company out of New Jersey.
That
was
only
mainly
did commercials.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, ILM wasn't available.
Well, no. They didn't have the money to hire them.
Oh, okay.
ILM
So-
was very available. Paramount just didn't give them the money to be able to afford it.
Yeah,
So-
ILM worked on many films at the same time.
Yep.
I mean, they worked
And-
on all the other Star Trek movies, right? They worked on Wrath
Yep.
of Khan, motion picture.
Well, they-
Not
not
that
motion
motion
picture.
They sent them they gave them the model that they had been using for all the movies up to that point. And this New Jersey company didn't have the money nor the wherewithal to be able to fix all the battle damage that had been left over from Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. So they had to use reverse film technology. They basically just filmed it and then reversed the shots to create the other side of the Enterprise. Unfortunately, they couldn't figure out a way of undoing the effect of having a lot of the stuff on the outside of the ship that's also reversed, like a lot of the words, lettering, and stuff like that. No, Star Trek V is a really cool idea. The examination of both Spock and McCoy and Kirk, all of that stuff is just freaking amazing. But the actual execution of the movie, not so much. Okay,
That's a different.
yeah, that's a different book, although I highly recommend it because that
Yeah.
was part of those massive Star Trek books that they put out, those really thick books. And
Strangers from the Sky and that one, and oh yeah,
Strangers from the Sky is probably my all-time favorite Star Trek novel because of what it's about and what it covers, and which, to me, if I had had the power to do it, I would have said, turn that into a movie and you'll make all the money.
Yep.
You
They
know?
even had a proto Cybok in there with Spock's cousin.
Yep. All of it was just amazing. Now, here's the thing. You see that you see that book right there?
Which
That
one?
guy in the white book, Cybog, Your Pain Runs Deep.
This is great. This
Hold
con
on.
man took away my pain.
Do you know who he really is? The actor
actor?
playing the part.
Yeah, that's Lawrence Luckinbill. That's Lucille Ball's son-in-law.
That's right.
Mhm.
So that's who they were able to get instead of Sean Connery.
Yeah, so he's connected to Star Trek history. He's connected to Lucy. So,
But
yeah.
the thing is he's not a big draw for an actor. Not many people know. who
Nowhere
he
near.
is.
Not, he's not Sean. He kind of resembles Sean Connery a little bit, but no, he's not Sean Connery.
Yeah, he's
No.
a character actor. And he's good. He was a good character actor. He's
Yeah.
really
Oh, yeah,
good character actor.
I think he was
Not
the
taking
one
anything
thing
from
that he was the one. His performance was like the one thing that was praised by critics, if I remember correctly, when they were basically saying Star Trek V is a piece of crap. Like he was the one thing that was positive about the movie.
And guess what? Here we have another book that I've read, the Star Trek V, The Final Frontier, William Shatner's personal account of the making of Star Trek V. That book I own. I've
This
read
one?
that cover to cover. Yep.
And I think Melanie Shatner also did one too.
Actually,
was-
no, this is
now
the
Mel-
one written by Elizabeth.
Oh,
So
Elizabeth.
which
I mean,
one?
sorry,
So
Elizabeth,
which?
my fault.
Which daughter is his yeoman in this movie?
Elizabeth.
Was it
Elizabeth.
Elizabeth? Okay.
And yeah, if you're going to look for the Final Frontier, it's J.M. Dillard, who is the author of the book.
Yeah.
Okay. I am going to do one thing I do want to do in the future is I do want to do retrospectives, kind of like a lot of other channels have been doing. I want to do retrospective on like each of the show's seasons, movies, and stuff. Which is this is down the line, but this stuff I have to do heavy research to do. But yeah, this is something this is a project. These are future projects I want to do eventually. So
Well,
you should
look,
read up all about this.
I will say this. There is nothing like Star Trek.
I agree.
Yeah.
That's why I feel what's the crap they're making now. They take away what made Star Trek unique in the first place, and it's nothing but mush science fiction.
Yeah. Well, I
can
wouldn't
even
even
call
call
it
what they're
science
doing
fiction.
science fiction.
Exactly.
It's
No.
just mush. I will say that it is worth your time if you really want to do a deep dive to try to read as many of the novels and stuff that have been written about Star Trek as far as from a production standpoint. David Gerard wrote 2 books. Gerald. Why do I keep saying? David Gerald wrote 2 books, okay, about the production of Star Trek. His first one is called The Trouble with the Tribbles account, and the other one was The World
The
of
World
Star
of Star
Trek.
Trek.
Yeah, you've read those. Yeah, great books. Great books.
Yeah.
And way easier read than the Making of Star Trek book. Okay.
You know what? There is a book I did start reading and then I just stopped because it just got too much for me. But I need to resume it. I think it's called Strange New Worlds, or not Strange New Worlds. It's like 3 parts. It like covers each season. I forget what exactly it's called, but
You talking about the logs?
uh,
Because they did a series where they did like little all together in the series of book of the seasons of the original Star Trek. Then they did the same thing with the animated.
I forget what they were called. There's Making of Star Trek. Yeah, that's not the one I read. These are the voyages. These are the voyages. I got
Okay.
I got the first one on my Kindle. I started reading it. I'm still on the first chapter. I'm still on the Gene Roddenberry stuff, and oh my gosh, it's just like, wow, this is a lot of stuff. Like these are, yeah. But
Well, I will say this. For these books that you see in front of you right now, Inside Star Trek, The World of Star Trek,
Mm-hmm.
the Star Trek
I have this
Compendium,
one. I have this one.
cool.
Mm-hmm.
Star
Yep.
Trek Creator, Star Trek Memories. All of those,
I remember this one.
all of those are worth your time to read.
Mm-hmm.
All of those. I think the only other things I would add would be the additional biographies by the rest of the actors, and of course William Shatner's sequel called Star Trek Movie Memories.
Mm-hmm.
But I would also add in, let's see, Bijo Trimble's book that she did on the Good Ship Enterprise.
If I remember
And-
correctly, she's the one that led the letter campaign to revive
Yep.
season.
Yeah,
3,
the
I
writing
believe.
campaign.
Her and her husband.
Yep.
Yeah.
The super fans. Yep.
And then,
I would even go so far to say if you can find Harlan Ellison in The City on the Edge of Forever, his
Yeah.
fellow played scripts.
Oh, I know. I think I know how that ends. It's totally different. Like they totally rewrote that book or that script.
yes. Well, now,
I think originally Spock pushes her into the truck or something like that. I think that's how he originally had it end. Like,
Well-
no, this doesn't work.
yeah. Well, here's the other thing. I forgot my point. I'm getting old. I think there have been so many things written about Star Trek. I think it's gotten to a point where I think it's important for people to actually read, first and foremost, what the people who actually worked on the show said.
Right.
Okay? You also have to understand that when it comes to the actors, all of the actors, everybody has a particular point of view. Everybody's got a reason for what they're writing and how they're writing. Okay? So it's important to try to find books that try to give it to you straight, that don't try to cover things or shade things one way or another, that just sort of give it to you. Here's what happened. This is it. This is how this is. This is how that works. That is the reason why Inside Star Trek is the best book, because that's really all that it's about. All the rest of it's about personalities and how people get along, and that's fine. There are people that want to read that. I personally, I like hearing what the actors have to say about themselves, mainly about their lives and how they came to be on Star Trek and what's happened since. But I can't really take their word for it as far as, well, this is how things worked. Because, again, everybody's got their own point of view and their own agenda to wanting to say what they need to say. Inside Star Trek is really just about providing for the record what happened. How the show got, from the moment the show was greenlit to be made, to the show's final episodes and the final thing that they did. That book is meant to cover that. And not
So there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff that I'm assuming a lot of stuff that Bob Justman says. If you, I'm sure you've seen the special features of the DVDs when they came out with the DVD seasons in 2004. I'm guessing all the stuff that he talks about in those, and probably more is in this book.
Yeah. Well, and,
Okay.
and you'll be able to see you'll be able to see a lot of the memos and contracts that back up what he's saying. It's easy for someone to write a book and say, well, it was like this. You kind of have to at least trust that person to a certain extent. They have to earn your trust. But if someone's providing you contracts and memos and receipts, that creates a difference there. And again, when you have everyone that has worked on this book from Mr. Solo to Mr. Justin and all those who are referenced. Ooh, yes.
Another one by Herbert Solo and his wife.
Ooh, I'm jealous.
Is this
You
all
don't have
the?
that
I do
think
not
I've
have that one.
Is that where they have all the sketches of all the original series sets?
Oh my god! Mine got ripped to shreds. Oh my god!
The original
Who wrote
concordance
that?
by Bejo.
The original concordance.
Who wrote that? Who wrote
Bejo Trimble.
Bejo Trimble. Okay.
Yeah, show him the special thing about the cover. Show him the thing about the cover.
Oh yeah. Cutie mouse. Watch my book. Don't eat it. Yeah, it's a little spin thing on here. So
A little
you
dial.
can, yeah. So it's like I got the wrong glasses on. But you spin the dial around, and there's little things in there you get information on.
Yeah, so you can
That's
go
very
with the
nice.
name of the episode and the star date that coordinates with that episode.
Mm-hmm.
And then you could, I think, even get to didn't also tell you what page to look at to
I
find.
think so. Yeah, it's like call letter. Like I said, I got my wrong glasses. I don't have my cheaters in here.
When was that published?
yeah,
Was that
that's
published
right.
in
Oh,
the,
God.
Oh,
in the 80s,
Early
70s?
1970s. At least
Okay.
1974, 75.
1976.
Ugh. I remember finding that book and that was the centerpiece of my entire collection. Was that
Oh
book?
wow!
Those are the fan drawings.
Holy crap!
And but show him the listings for all the episodes. Look at this. You get the name of each episode, who wrote it, who starred in it. And this was all the way back in 1976 that they printed that. So you get all that information plus a synopsis of the episode.
And
So like the earliest version.
And
So the earliest version of the encyclopedia before Mike Okuda and his wife did their version.
If you take a look there, they're using there's your animated Orions or Orions, as they call them.
What these guys in the picture of those guys?
Yeah.
Those were Orions.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh,
From the animated series. Yeah. So you had stuff in here, a lot of stuff with the animated in here as well. But yeah, those are the Orions, as they called it actually in the episode for the animated.
I'm guessing this book is really hard to find and super duper expensive.
Yeah, that's
I
the reason
don't
why
know.
the Okudas did their own version. But
Yeah. Bejo did another one. It's not quite like that one. La-dee-dee. La-da-da. Yeah. So here I'm back again. So Bejo did a second one. Thank you, Mouse. And that's
That's nice
the
art.
poem.
That's okay. Is that
And,
that's a later version?
Yeah, this one is from what year is this one from? 1995. So it's kind of it's a little different in there. You have newer art in there from fans and such. You still have like the lexicon in the back. Yep.
Okay, I
And of
see
course-
that.
And of course, the all important, the compendium, like you were talking about before, which breaks down episodes, who was in the episodes, stuff like that. Well, that one's bent. Okay, that makes me mad. And a little
Yeah, I
bit
got
of
the
history
Gorns.
stuff.
I got the Gorns signature at, in Las Vegas last summer.
Okay,
So, all right.
but without Forbidden Planet, we wouldn't have that. Let's be honest.
Back to Forbidden Planet. But yeah, I totally agree. Like just the style. I mean, it's super duper influential. But I still think it's to most people. I think it's underrated. Like I didn't know anybody that saw that movie. It's not really until it's not until I started really getting into science fiction that I learned about it and then finally watched it. And I was like, holy crap! Nobody ever told me it was this much like Star Trek. So it was a unique experience seeing a movie that a lot of the stuff that I really love, a lot of the visual ideas and even some of the writing ideas came from. So,
Yep.
I mean, if you say you're a Star Trek fan and you have not seen this film, see this film.
Yep.
I totally agree. Yeah. So yeah, if you guys ever get a chance, check out Forbidden Planet. So, all right. So, any final thoughts? We're gonna wrap this. We're gonna wrap this up.
Fi-
I'll let
Like-
Keith go. I let Keith go first
like
since
Keith first.
he's gotta go.
He's got to go. Yeah.
I think you pretty much said it. I mean, seriously, this film, Forbidden Planet, is a classic, and there's a reason why it is. It is just good, solid science fiction adventure, really. This is the kind of science fiction, though, that we were reading in a lot of the magazines, and again, it's very reminiscent of something that you would see in Lensman and others, classic science fiction. I can't even fathom what Star Trek would have been without this film. This
If it
one
would have
and Horatio Hornblower, I can't even begin to, just see it if you haven't, and have a good time. Get some popcorn, enjoy it on the big screen, and if you get a chance, watch Horatio Hornblower, and also watch the new 4K director's version of Star Trek: The Motion Picture. Everything's been redone, including the sound. The sound is now up to date, and trust me, it'll be worth your time.
I can't wait to see it on the big screen. That's how I'm going to see it. So, is there anything you want to promote, Keith? You have a channel. You part of a channel.
Just come find us on Pop Culture Minefield. With myself and of course Gary, because Gary's cool.
Yeah.
He is.
I love it, Gary. I can't tease you.
But we usually will try to do our show like tonight. We had our show called the Scoop Zone, where we discuss all of the big scoops that Mikey Sutton has, and then usually on Fridays we have TGIF, and then we have our big Saturday show, which is usually noon Central Time on Saturdays. Which is just pretty much just us. Think of it as sort of like, remember when you were little and you would get up early on Saturday mornings and grab your big bowl of cereal and just sit down and watch cartoons or other things? Just a bunch of us friends talking. Hopefully, engaging some of those memories in your brain of what it was like to just do that and hang out with friends and all of that stuff. So, Pop Culture Minefield. We're here for you.
Subscribe to Pop Culture Minefield.
Yep. And Gary's been letting me join in on those Saturday ones, so I'm very happy to be a thorn in you guys' side.
Oh, you're not a thorn. You are old just like we are, although, you look really good compared to me. So.
Oh, you got that Ozzie Davis look to you, man.
Oh. That means so much. I need to tell my wife that one.
Okay. Well,
that's all I got, though. I mean, first of all, thank you for inviting me. I really do appreciate being on this. I appreciate you allowing me to derail the entire conversation and just sort of mentally wander through everything. Get a chance, check out Jerry Anderson and what he's done. Space 1999, which was actually season 3 of, originally meant to be season 3 of UFO. And
really?
They
Okay.
changed it and spun it off as its own show, and it's a completely different thing. And
So is it in the same universe?
No.
No?
What happens, they ran into a little bit of a thing, and then you lost the actors, and so he went out and got himself a whole new group of actors, and ended up creating one of the biggest science fiction shows post Star Trek, the original series. Because the show premiered in 1974, and was an international hit. I mean, that show was huge. I remember when it debuted, everybody was like, "Did you see that show, Space 1999? Oh my god!" So, oh man, yeah, British science fiction, nothing like it. It's good for you.
So should I watch UFO first before Space 1999, or does it not matter?
It doesn't matter. I mean, I think Jerry Anderson was just looking to do something a little bit different rather than dealing with puppets. In fact, he had a show that was not space related that he did, and he did that before. I think he did it after UFO, but before Space 1999, if I remember correctly. I think it was called The Persuaders.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's the one with Roger Moore and Tony Curtis, right? No, not that one.
No.
No. That was different. Sorry, that was a different show. My apologies. But yeah, The Persuaders. Oh, God, now you got me.
It's oh man, Jerry Anderson. It's not The Persuaders. No. You're right. That's Roger Moore and Tony Curtis. He did another one called the... Oh, man, this getting old thing.
And the thing is, I can keep up with you, Keith. That's the scary thing.
Oh, jeez. Because it was, it starred, it starred actor, Robert Vaughn.
Oh, from Man from Uncle.
Oh, yeah. What the hell is that? The Protectors.
The Protectors. That's
72 to 74. There we go.
Yep. That's it. The Protectors. Yeah, but for you, I got another show for you. It's called The Avengers.
The one with the one from the 60s, right?
Yes.
John Steed. Yes. Mm-hmm. You know what's funny? My friends brought up The Avengers back in 2011, and they were talking about Marvel's Avengers, and I thought they were talking about that Avengers because I don't for some reason I didn't ever heard of. I forgot all about Marvel's Avengers, despite the fact that I played the old arcade game back in the day, Captain America, and the Avengers. So yeah, it's because I remember the remake came out in the 90s. It was Sean Connery was the villain, I believe.
Yep.
And I think the movie flopped hard and stuff.
It did.
Yeah, it did.
It was terrible.
Yeah, Roy Fiennes was was Steed.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the thing. If you really enjoyed the original Avengers television series and you like the feel and all of that, then there's a TV show that you can now watch on HBO Max. It's called Pennyworth.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, about Alfred?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That show is very much like the Avengers.
So it's very spy thriller.
It has some spy stuff, but for the most part, it's you got to see it. It's not what you think it would be.
Okay.
And it's still very entertaining. So.
Yeah, the only thing I've seen spy related in the '60s was The Prisoner. And that was a very interesting ending.
Well, but you also are seeing the ending to a particular storyline begun in another television series.
Danger Man.
Yep.
Oh, Danger Man. Okay.
See, that's the interesting thing about that show. Patrick McGoohan was Danger Man, and he was kind of like a secret agent spy type. So
the song Secret Agent Man, that one?
Yeah. That's what it was named when he came to the States, so Secret Agent Man.
And so, to have a sequel series be so different and to cover a lot of things was really radical. And so, yeah, it's you should check it out. For all of you who have never seen it. So
Secret Agent Man is a good show, as they call it in the States.
That's kind of also what happened with the original version of the Equalizer.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, there was
You
an
know-
original Equalizer? That I did not know.
Yeah, the
Well-
Equalizer was a hit television show from CBS, 1983, and
Something like that, yeah.
and the theme song was done by the drummer of the Police, Stuart Copeland.
Mhm.
And I love the show. The show was fantastic. So the movie version is kind of like a reboot, restart, altered slightly differently. But I mean, it still covers, it still covers basically the same character. But the Equalizer, good show, really good show. The original Equalizer.
Yeah,
I should
not
say.
the new one.
Well, I don't. Now the television version with Queen Latifah, I don't get that. I don't understand.
I don't know.
But I don't mind the Denzel Washington one. I mean,
Mhm.
Didn't they make two of those? They made two of those, right?
yeah, two Denzel Washington ones, and there's talk of doing another one. So
I still have not seen those.
it's kind of different than the original television series. You can go on YouTube and see clips from that.
Yep. Edward Woodward was the star of the show.
That's right. His son Peter is one of the actors that was a part of the sequel television series to Babylon 5 called Babylon
Galen.
5. That's right. I met him. Great guy.
I did too. Yeah, I actually had a dinner with him.
Ooh, lucky you.
Yep. but I ended up spending more time with Frederick Pohl and David Gerald.
Still great. See,
I know.
Peter, the last time I saw him was on Fringe, the final season. He was
Okay.
in the final 2 episodes of Fringe.
Mm-hmm.
So,
He's got that great voice.
oh, geez, yes.
Oh.
Oh, my goodness.
Mhm.
Listen, I have wasted enough of your time.
We have to do something like this and just bullshit about this stuff, man.
Oh,
Oh,
old
sorry,
guys
I didn't say
talking.
bullshit. Yeah, old guy. Yeah,
Old guys
Old
talking.
geeks.
And the young
Old
and the
geeks
young
talking.
and the young guy and me just listening.
I don't mind you listening. I don't mind you
No.
asking questions at all. I mean,
No.
you kind of keep me honest here. But
You were like me when I was with David Gerald and Frederick Pohl. I just sitting there going, okay, what? Oh,
wow.
All right. Wow. So, about you, Baron? Don't you have anything going on?
Of course, just want to finish up with just back saying it. Go see this. This is one of the top Star Trek films ever made. This was radical. This was game changer. Go watch it. On Saturday, I hope to be with Keith on the Saturday morning show with the Pulp Culture. If Gary opens the door for me. He seems to like me. And later on that night, I'll be with Pacific 414 talking about, of all things, Wrestler. Rah!
Oh,
And
that's
gonna be-
right.
Yeah, 7 p.m. Central Standard Time, 8 Eastern.
So
So,
everybody subscribe to Baron Orman Tag, and of course, because I get residuals, also subscribe to Pacific 414.
Yes.
All because I just say I get every time I say something, I always ask for $5.
There we go.
So.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, then you can always catch me with the Kings on Sundays at 5:15. That's with 24/7 Fusion Media, the mysterious Vigilante Williamson, the fantastic Fat Steven Seagal, who I'm going to have on my Wednesday night show next week. Baron After Dark, 9 o'clock Central Time every Wednesday, and he's my next guest.
You guys rock. I want that officially on record. You guys truly rock.
When are you coming on? You're supposed to come on the other week.
I
I
was.
invited you. I invited you.
Oh, I am
You know,
so
you're gonna be
sorry.
there.
Look,
Oh,
look.
well, it was about a month ago or whatever. But
Yeah,
come
we'll
on,
we'll
man.
talk. We'll talk sometime because my real life has been beyond interesting. So
Yeah, I can understand. I mean, we had Gary on there twice. We got to have you on at least once. We have to have the other side. To the
the other side. Yes, the talker.
So that's
All right.
basically everything about with me. So yeah, and definitely go out. And you know what? I'm going to step one further. If you are readers of science fiction, get off your butts and find old science fiction. I'm talking about stuff from the 50s. I'm talking about stuff from the 40s. Yeah, they might not be scientifically accurate, but these are the things that gave us what we have now. And enjoy it. It's just relax, sit back, relax, enjoy it for what it is.
Just the amount of imagination that went into those is unmatched. So yeah,
right.
I totally agree. Well, as for me, I mean, obviously, I think I feel this stream was a great success. Thank you, Keith and Baron, for taking it over, and just me stepping to the side, just enjoying listening and stuff.
Yep. Best.
So for me, I have 2 streams coming up. One's going to be Saturday night. I'm going to be resuming my Lord of the Rings 2 Towers stream. We're going to cover disc 2 of the extended version. So it's going to probably be a 3 to 4 hour discussion. So join us for that when if you're watching Pacific 414's wrestling thing, come by afterwards and stuff. And then on Monday, I'm going to be doing, and I don't know how many of you guys like Better Call Saul, but I am looking forward to the final season of Better Call Saul. And I'm going to be having a couple people on. We're going to be talking about the story thus far, and then every week after that, I'm going to be covering each of the episodes. So join me for that. And my next video related project will probably be a review on the movie Dirty Harry. So expect that, and of course my Mario 64 retrospective will be coming soon, and other stuff will be revealed down the line. So yeah, that's where I'm at. So once again, gentlemen, thank you. Loki, if you're out there listening, thank you for coming on. It was great having you here too. And chat, thank you so much for staying this whole time. I know it's almost midnight, well, here in Central Time it's almost midnight and stuff, so yeah. You guys rock and stuff. And just once again, everybody, stay Nerdporeal. Let the wings of Nerdporeals carry y'all to a great freaking weekend. All right, everybody, take care and have a great night.